Chapter 1131. The powerhouses that were able to stand tall in the sealed demon realm for countless years without falling were all renowned powerhouses throughout the ages. There were even some terrifying existences that had followed the demon god to conquer the three realms since the demon realm was established. Even though this place followed the law of the jungle, where the weak were prey to the strong and the strong were respected. But in this world, no matter how strong you were, whether you were an infamous giant or not, whether you were a terrifying existence left behind from a distant era, there was only one true master here. Everyone had to submit to him, or else they would die 10,000 times instead of being able to live. The first master of the demon realm was the demon god knight who created the demon realm. This was an ancient legend. The second was the demon god's son, demon lord Yi. The third was Yi's son, demon lord Yi. The fourth was demon lord Yi's son, demon lord Yi. Other than the first one who was addressed as the demon god, his descendants were all addressed as demon lord to show their respect to the demon god. There were 3 generations of demon lords in the demon world, and the current one was the demon god's great-grandson, demon lord 3 Knights. The reason why the demon god's lineage was able to rule the demon realm until now, aside from the treasured techniques left behind by the demon god, it was also thanks to the demon god that the 72 great demon kings under him had their primordial spirits forcibly removed. Although the 72 great demon kings under the demon god had lost nearly half, the primordial spirits of the remaining 36 great demon kings were still in the hands of the demon god's descendant, demon lord 3 Knights. Although these 36 great demon kings had powerful magic power and profound cultivation, demon lord 3 Knights had their primordial spirits in his hands. If he wanted to kill them, it would be as easy as raising his hand. With these 36 great demon kings guarding the demon realm, they were the cornerstone of demon lord 3 Knights ruling over the demon realm. But to most of the heroes of the demon realm, the 36 great demon kings were unreachable figures. They rarely showed themselves unless something big happened, not to mention the supreme ruler of the demon realm, demon lord 3 Knights. Everyone in the demon world knew that ever since the demon lord fell for the trap and was sealed away by the immortal and netherworld emperors, the 3 Knights demon lord had lived in the demon palace and rarely came out. It was said that the 3 Knights demon lord blamed himself for this. In reality, when the demon world was sealed, many people blamed demon lord 3 Knight for his incompetence, which led to the demon world falling into such a state. This kind of discussion became more and more intense. Not long after, an expert followed the will of the people and strongly demanded that the demon lord 3 Knights hand over the primordial spirits of the 36 great demon kings and hand over the throne of the demon lord. In the end, this completely angered the demon king of 3 Knights. With a single order, he carried out a bloodbath. He would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. Anyone who was even a little bit related to this matter, was all killed, completely uprooted. After the bloodbath, it was unknown how many people died. Everyone kept quiet out of fear. After all, their lives were more important. No one dared to mention this matter again, at least not openly. After this matter, the demon lord 3 Knights once again lived in the demon palace. For many years, outsiders rarely saw him again. He had almost become a legend. However, just a few years ago, the demon palace that was shrouded in blood clouds suddenly moved again. One day, all 36 great demon kings guarding the demon world were summoned to the demon palace, causing the heroes of the demon world to try to figure out what was going on. Later, the news spread. The demon palace had received news that someone had seen the demon blade that the demon lord had used in the past and that the divine blade had recognized a new master. Demon lord 3 Knights was greatly shocked. He immediately used all his power to search and finally found that person. He brought him back to the demon palace. It was said that he had been appointed as the next demon lord's successor, but no one knew if this was true or not. Following that, the demon palace moved frequently. All the powers under its control continuously gathered all kinds of things and sent them to the demon palace. It was said that Demon Lord Three Knights had taken a liking to that successor, and all the things he gathered were for that successor's cultivation. On this day, under a continuous mountain range shrouded in red blood clouds, a group of men and women who had come from afar were being escorted to the mountain pass. Dozens of people flew out from the mountain pass to block them. The person in the lead stepped out and stared at the leader of the escort team. The latter quickly tossed a token to him and cupped his fists, saying, "By the decree of the Clear Sky Demon King, we offer 3,000 chaste men and 3,000 chaste women to the Demon Palace." The leader of the guards at the mountain pass checked the token and tossed it back to the other party. With a light wave of his hand, the row of people in front of the mountain pass immediately split into two sides. The 3,000 men and women who had their hands bound together by the tree vines were immediately ordered to slowly walk into the mountain pass. Occasionally, they would raise their heads to look into the depths of the blood clouds, their faces filled with unconcealable fear. Meanwhile, the guards at the two sides of the mountain pass inspected them one by one. Only those whose cultivation had been sealed could be allowed to enter. The wind in the mountains was cold and desolate, and the mountain path was rugged. Everywhere, there were new or weathered white bones. Occasionally, there would be a clear, kacha sound when someone stepped on these white bones. Everyone looked at these escorted men and women as if they were looking at dead people, as if they would soon become the white bones they were currently stepping on. Meanwhile, the people who had been escorted here had ashen faces as soon as they stepped into the mountain pass, as if they knew that their deaths were not far away. At this moment, the three streaks of light that were streaking across the sky suddenly stopped, turned around, and landed on the hillside of the mountain pass. The three young men with extraordinary auras swept their cold eyes over the crowd below. Everyone looked up. When the guards at the mountain pass saw these three people, they were immediately shocked. Putting down what they were doing, they knelt down on one knee and said, "Greetings to the three young masters." Another quick-witted person shouted at the people who had been bound together, "Hurry up and kneel down to greet the three young masters." The guards who had escorted the people here immediately pointed at the prisoners and said sternly, "Hurry up and kneel down to greet the three young masters." "Greetings, young master." The disorderly crowd knelt down and shouted in a disorderly manner. The three people who had arrived were the three sons of the Demon Lord of Three Knights. The eldest was Yi Wanzong, the second was Yi Yuyuan, and the third was Yi Tuobian. The Demon Lord of Three Knights originally had 4 sons, and the youngest was called Yi Tiankong. Ever since he was young, he was quick-witted and studious, and the Demon Lord of Three Knights deeply doted on him. However, what made the Demon Lord of Three Knights sigh was that such a good seedling did not have the aptitude to cultivate. Later on, after Yi Tiankong grew up, he ran away from home alone. Until now, there had been no news of him, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. At this moment, the person standing on the mountain pass was the eldest son of the Demon Lord of Three Knights, Yi Wanzong. Looking at the crowd kneeling down below, Yi Wanzong frowned and said, "Go back to your work." Instantly, shouts rang out from below, and the 3,000 men and women immediately walked in one after another as they went through the inspection. On the mountain pass, Yi Yuyuan looked down at the crowd and suddenly snorted coldly, "These people must have been recruited by father for that new brat. Father is too biased. We, his own children, can't even compare to an outsider." Yi Tuobian looked at his big brother, Yi Wanzong, and said, "The successor of the Demon Lord should have been Big Brother, but father actually stripped Big Brother of his right of inheritance and gave it to an outsider. What kind of logic is this?" The two brothers spoke one after another, and Yi Wanzong's expression also became increasingly gloomy. In the crowd, a woman with disheveled hair suddenly thought of something when she heard that the 3 people who had arrived were actually the 3 young masters of the Demon Palace. She quickly combed her disheveled hair, revealing a charming and moving face as she raised her head to welcome the 3 people on the mountain pass. However, the 3 young masters did not see her at all, and there were even signs of them leaving. Instantly, the woman became anxious. Suddenly, the sound of bones being stepped on caused her eyes to light up. Lowering her head, she saw a skull that had been kicked around. She hurriedly stepped on it, and her body immediately fell to the side. "Io!" A voice that sounded like a nightingale's cry rang out. It wasn't loud, but it was clear and moving. Instantly, someone in the crowd lost his footing and fell to the ground. However, because there were ropes made of tree vines between them, they did not completely fall to the ground. However, this caused the procession to pause for a moment. The person who was escorting them immediately lashed out with a whip, and angrily shouted, "Get up!" After the sound of the whip, there was another cry of pain. It was obviously a cry of pain, but it was sharp and melodious like the chirping of an oriole, causing one's heartstrings to involuntarily tremble. On the mountain pass, the three young masters who were about to leave all turned around to look at the same time. They saw a woman holding the wound on her arm as she staggered to her feet. Inadvertently, she raised her head, revealing an enchanting face that could topple cities. There was a trace of pain on her jade-like face as she bit her red lips and continued to move forward. At this moment, the expressions of the three brothers immediately stiffened, and their hearts all palpitated. They did not expect that such a stunning beauty would be hidden among these people. Such a stunning beauty is actually a virgin. It's really rare. However, it's a pity that she will only become nourishment for his demonic arts if she falls into the hands of that brat. What a waste. The third brother Yituobian could not help but let out a long sigh. The second brother also sighed and shook his head, feeling that it was a great pity. The eldest brother Yiwanzong's face turned gloomy. Suddenly, he shouted to the people below, "Wait!" The people below paused, and everyone looked over. They saw Yiwanzong waving his hand and pointing at the beautiful woman who was being whipped. He said indifferently, "The others can go, but I want her to stay." The leader of the escort team looked towards the mountain pass with some difficulty, and said, "Young master, please forgive me. It's hard to find virgins in the devil realm. The great devil king spent a lot of effort to find them. Before I came here, I received a decree that all 3,000 men and women must be sent here. If even one of them is missing, I will be punished." "Huh?" Yiwanzong's expression changed, and he snorted coldly, "Aren't you afraid that I will punish you now?" Seeing that the other party was at a loss and in fear, Yiwanzong's tone changed, and he said, "I will explain to the great devil king. You can push the blame to me, and it will not involve you. Leave this person for me." Then again, if this little pawn insisted on not giving him the woman, even though he was the dignified young master of the devil palace, there was nothing he could do. He did not dare to rob the great devil king of the azure sky's belongings. If he did, the nature of the act would change. It should be known that the great devil king of the azure sky was a character who followed his ancestor, the devil god. He was one of the most senior figures in the entire devil realm. Even his father, the devil king 3 Knights, would not treat him lightly, let alone him. Naturally, he had to be tactful and ask for the woman. Chapter 1132. Since the dignified young master of the devil palace had spoken to this extent, the leader naturally wouldn't say anything else. Otherwise, he would really be insensible. Even if Yiwanzong let him go now, the great devil king Qing Tian wouldn't let him go after this. It was very possible that he might even be killed to save the face of the young master of the devil palace. Hence, the leader quickly went to the crowd and untied the whipped woman, removing her from the crowd. Yiwanzong, who was on the hillside, raised his hand and grabbed the woman, directly pulling her to the hillside. He held her soft waist with one hand and gently parted the messy hair that covered her face with the other. Her enchanting face that could topple cities caused the expressions of the few brothers to freeze again. The woman, on the other hand, was struggling, seemingly timid, afraid, and shy. Yiwanzong smiled faintly and said, "Let's go back." "Go back?" Yituobian was stunned and said, "Aren't we going to play?" At this moment, the group of thousands of men and women who were escorted here immediately knelt down and begged one after another, "Young master, save us. Following that, everyone else also knelt down and begged for mercy. The scene was a mess. When everyone saw the person who could save their lives, they immediately had the will to live. Yi Wanzong wouldn't save them, and it was impossible for him to save them. He glanced down and said indifferently, "I'm not going back." Then, he picked up the beautiful woman and rushed back to the depths of the mountain range that was shrouded in blood-colored mist. The remaining two brothers looked at each other and smiled in tacit understanding. Then, they returned to the group as well. Immediately, the sound of whips and whips resounded in the mountain pass. A large group of people were once again chased into the mountain pass. After the inspection was completed, a few large flying devices were brought out from the mountain pass and everyone was chased onto them. They were quickly transported to the depths of the mountain range. Not long after, a towering mountain that stood out from the flock of chickens appeared in front of the trembling crowd. The mountain was ferocious, and it was pressing down on them. This wasn't their destination. The flying device that carried them went around the mountain and continued to go deeper. However, it didn't prevent them from looking up at the magnificent palace on the peak of the mountain. The magnificent palace that was covered in blood-red clouds was the legendary palace where the Devil King of 3 Nights resided. On the peak of the mountain, a man dressed in a white robe and a white hat appeared unusually neat and tidy. His face was also fair and clean, and he was skinny and stiff. He silently stood on a black Chilan beast that was carved on the cliff, looking at the few large flying devices that flew past the mountain. In fact, there were many carvings of all kinds of ferocious beasts around the plaza on the summit. They were facing in all directions. The images were lifelike, mighty, and frightening. At this moment, the white-robed man standing on top of the Chilan beast, and he looked at him and said in a sharp voice, "What?" The white-robed man standing on top of the Chilan beast slowly turned around and asked him with a sharp voice. The guard leader immediately told him about how Yi Wanzong had taken away a woman who was consecrated by the Devil King of Qing Tian. After listening to the story, the white-robed man expressionlessly waved his hand, indicating that he understood. After the guard leader left, he turned around and looked at the dark and oppressive magnificent palace under the blood-red clouds. He took a step forward, and a few illusions of his footsteps immediately appeared on the black jade-like square. He walked 1,000 meters away in a few moments, and appeared at the open door of the palace. He slowly walked in. The palace was frighteningly quiet. The surrounding walls were filled with carvings of all kinds of ferocious beasts. The most eye-catching one was the wide scarlet blood jade throne that was placed on the high platform. It was a complete whole, and there were no marks on it. It was obviously carved from a single piece of blood jade. Sitting on it was a well-built man who was not small. He was clad in black armor and had a scarlet cloak on his shoulders. His hair was tied up and he wore a crown. His eyebrows were thick and black like a horned dragon, his nose was like a hanging gull, and his lips were thick. He was resting one arm on the armrest of the blood jade throne, and he was holding his forehead with his fist. His eyes were closed, and one of his feet was curled up under his thigh, and the other was placed on the throne. His other hand was placed on his knee, and half of his body was covered by a scarlet cloak. He was sitting there quietly, and no one knew if he was asleep or not. Even so, he was like a sleeping tiger, and he was not angry, but he was like a fierce tiger. All the air in the hall seemed to be under his control by inhaling and exhaling. The white-robed eunuch walked over lightly, walked up the stairs, and walked to the side where he was lying. He bent his head and whispered in that person's ear about how Yi Wanzong took away the woman that the demon king Qing Tian had consecrated. After listening, that person only let out a soft to indicate that he understood. Eunuch was about to leave, but he suddenly realized that the person's eyes had opened a little, and there was a flash of light in his eyes. He then bowed slightly and waited for instructions. Such a coincidence? That person's eyes flickered, and his thick lips moved slightly. He said in a deep voice, "Investigate that woman's background clearly. If she is not clean, then do as you see fit." If it is purely a coincidence, then forget it. Wanzong probably has a grudge against me. Eunuch Li, who was about to obey the order, was stunned when he heard the last sentence. He then said in a sharp voice, "One day, young lord will understand the Demon King's painstaking efforts." Seeing that the person's eyes slowly closed again, he did not say anything more, and quickly walked down the stairs and out of the palace. Not long after Eunuch Li left the palace, that person's ears suddenly twitched, and his eyes suddenly opened. He heard a hazy voice shouting in his ears, "San Yi! San Yi!" He immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Who is it?" As soon as he said this, the hazy voice in the void seemed to have found its target. A ball of gentle white light gradually appeared in the void in front of him, and after it seemed to have solidified, it quickly spread out like a ripple. It was like an unfolding picture scroll, and a clear scene appeared in the palace. In the picture scroll, there was a white-clothed, barefooted, and elegant man looking at him. There was also a dignified man dressed in golden robes staring at him without a smile, and his eyes seemed to be filled with vigilance. On the side, there were two people with shocked expressions, and they were also looking at him dumbfoundedly. Their background seemed to be in a mountain valley. On the other side of the picture, when Yu Qianzhou and the others saw the dignified man appear in the picture, they immediately held their breaths and stared with wide eyes. The other person's attire, as well as the unmoving aura of a mountain lying on his side, seemed to pass through the obsidian light mirror and hit them in the face, extremely dignified. Especially the moment his eyes opened, it was even more breathtaking, causing people's minds to tremble. Just based on this unparalleled aura of being above others, decisive in killing, and supremacy, Yu Qianzhou and the Great Bright Will looked at each other in dismay. There was no need to guess. The dignified man in the obsidian light mirror was definitely the legendary Demon King Three Knights. In the mirror, the Demon King Three Knights' expression also froze, as if he had seen something inconceivable. He suddenly stood up with a whoosh, and the scarlet cloak wrapped around his body fluttered behind him. He opened his eyes wide and said, "Bai Qi! Jin Tai! It's the two of you?" Bai Qi and Jin Tai looked at each other and cupped their hands, saying, "How have you been, Demon King?" At the side, Yu Qianzhou hurriedly cupped his hands as well. He felt that it was inappropriate to just stand there in front of such a person. The Great Bright Will glanced at him, as if asking why he was joining in the fun. This Demon King Three Knights stretched out a finger, his eyes filled with bewilderment as he said, "What's going on?" Bai Qi smiled faintly, saying, "Demon King might not know, but the obsidian light mirror in my hand has the ability to peer into yin and yang, and can contact anyone in the three realms at any time. Jin Tai and I haven't seen Demon King for a long time, so we came together to pay our respects. I hope we didn't disturb Demon King." Obsidian light mirror. Demon King Three Knights frowned as he muttered to himself. The surprise on his face gradually disappeared, and he regained his calm. He looked at them and sneered, saying, "You two shameless and despicable fellows, since you want to pay your respects to this monarch, why don't you show your sincerity and open the seal of the demon realm? Come to the demon palace and pay your respects to this monarch." Yu Qianzhou sneaked a glance at the usually fickle and ruthless Jin Tai, and found that he was standing obediently at the side, not making a sound. His expression was slightly nervous, like a mouse seeing a cat. Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that this Demon King Three Knights truly lived up to his reputation. To be able to scare Jin Tai like this, there really was always one thing to conquer another. Before Demon King's anger subsides, Jin Tai and I don't dare to provoke Demon King, so we can only pay our respects from 2 realms away. Bai Qi said sincerely, "When Demon King's anger subsides, the 2 of us will personally go to the Demon Palace to apologize to Demon King." "Good. You really are out of control, daring to flirt with this monarch." Hearing this, Demon King Three Knights flew into a rage. He didn't believe that Bai Qi and Jin Tai would personally come to the Demon Palace to apologize. If this wasn't flirting, then what was? However, he couldn't do anything to these two, so he pointed at them and angrily shouted, "Two arrogant villains, you are only two dogs that this monarch supported to watch over the immortal world and underworld. If it wasn't for this monarch, how could the two of you sit on the thrones of the immortal emperor and underworld emperor? Two ingrates, I raised you up, but now you're biting back at your master. Just you wait, when the day I leave, I'll make your lives worse than death, and you'll be tortured for all eternity." Yu Qianqiu and Deming Luan were secretly shocked. Many people in the immortal and underworld thought of Bai Qi and Jin Tai as heroes who fought against the demonic Tao, but hearing Demon King Three Knights' words, Bai Qi and Jin Tai were actually supported by Demon King Three Knights. No wonder when the previous immortal emperor and underworld emperor died in battle, these two appeared out of nowhere and swept through the immortal and underworld realms, leading everyone to defeat the demonic Tao several times. In the end, they naturally ascended to the immortal emperor and underworld emperor's thrones. So there was a huge secret behind this, and Demon King Three Knights purposely supported them. Damn it! Knowing such a big secret, these two wouldn't kill them to silence them, right? Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Qi and Jin Tai warily, already prepared to leave at any time. Deming Luan also looked at the two nervously. Bai Qi and Jin Tai's expressions changed greatly. They didn't think that Demon King Three Knights would misunderstand Bai Qi's words, thinking that he was teasing him and actually revealed the secret. As a result, the two of them really regretted bringing these two people with them. Chapter 1133. However, what was done could not be undone. There was no way to take back his words. Bai Qi gritted his teeth and said, "Demon Monarch, you misunderstand. We didn't want to do that back then, but we were forced to do it." Yu Qianqiu, Deming Luan, and Jin Tai all held their breaths in concentration. They had already vaguely guessed who he was going to implicate. Force? Demon King Three Knights laughed maniacally, pointing at the two and shouting, "Speak. I'd like to see who's scheming against me." From his tone, it was clear that he didn't believe Bai Qi's words. He was waiting for Bai Qi to say who it was to expose his lies and then humiliate him. This was the only way. The two were communicating across two realms, so there was no other way but to humiliate each other. Demon Monarch, you might not know, but in the ancient forest of the immortal realm, there is a wood spirit with profound cultivation. Before Bai Qi finished speaking, Demon Monarch Three Knights' expression changed as if he had thought of something. His sharp gaze interrupted, "Mu Yuanzi of the Wood Killer Sea. Are you talking about him?" Bai Qi stilled. Even Jin Tai didn't know Old Man Mu's name and residence. He didn't think that Demon Monarch Three Knights would be able to identify the other's origins. Bai Qi couldn't help but mess up his plans. He was afraid that the two had a close relationship and wouldn't be able to fool him. But when he thought about it, he decided that he might as well be ruthless. Only when the three realms became more chaotic would Demon Monarch Three Knights have more use for them. Otherwise, Demon Monarch Three Knights would be able to do something like cooking all the hares. He said decisively, "Demon Monarch, please understand. It is that Mu Yuanzi of the Wood Killer Sea who is forcing us. His cultivation is profound, and we have no power to resist. But what Demon Monarch doesn't know is that Mu Yuanzi of the Wood Killer Sea isn't the only one involved. There are also a bunch of old fellows from the Netherworld Spirit Office fanning the flames. Otherwise, Demon Monarch, with just the two of us, how would we dare to become enemies with the entire Devil Path?" Jin Tai exclaimed in his heart, "Wonderful. The Netherworld Immortal Mansion, Old Man Mu, and the Devil Path. If these three parties were to fight against each other, there would be a greater chance of fishing in troubled waters." Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself that they were indeed ruthless. It was clear that they were either succeeding or dying for a righteous cause. Even if they didn't have a good ending, they would drag the whole world down with them. But what puzzled Yu Qianqiu was the Demon King Three Knights so gullible? Once Demon Lord Three Knights came out, he would be able to tell the truth with a single check. How could he be fooled? What he didn't know was that those who could reach the pinnacle had all gambled. There weren't many good things waiting for you to do in the world. Bai Qi and Jin Tai had gambled to success in the past, and Yu Qianzhou himself had gambled countless times. A commoner gambled a little, while a big shot gambled a lot. It was difficult for a person who was afraid of everything to achieve great things. The most important thing was that the Netherworld Immortal Mansion, Old Man Mu, and the Demon King 3 Knights were not people who would tolerate the other party's condemnation. If they did not agree with each other, they would fight to the death. There was basically no possibility of a good talk until the winner was decided. In addition, there was no way out, so Bai Qi had every reason to take a gamble. And the Netherworld Immortal Mansion. Demon Lord 3 Knights' eyebrows twitched like a horned dragon. No one knew what he was thinking, but he looked over and sneered. He flicked his scarlet cloak and sat down on the blood jade throne. He stared at the two of them and said with a faint smile, "You two are very honest. You've said everything that should and shouldn't be said. I'm afraid it's not that simple to see me today. If you have something to say, say it quickly. Don't beat around the bush with me. Demon Lord, please understand." Bai Qi cupped his hands and said sincerely, "Regarding what we did in the past, the two of us have been unable to eat or sleep in peace. After thinking about it again and again, we finally made a difficult decision. We're going to open the seal of the Devil World and let the Demon Lord rule the world again." As soon as these words came out, Demon Lord 3 Knights, who had just regained his composure, stood up again with a frightening aura. The thick black aura around his body was like a black dragon. Even though his mind was as steady as steel, he couldn't help but be moved when he heard these words. His eyes flickered. He knew that after so many years, Jin Tai and Bai Qi had suddenly come to visit him. This matter was probably not a joke. Bai Qi and Jin Tai exchanged glances. Seeing that Demon Lord 3 Knights had lost his composure, it meant that there was hope. However, Demon Lord 3 Knights was not someone to be trifled with. He calmed down in an instant and slowly sat down with his scarlet cloak on his back. He said sarcastically, "There's such a good thing? Unless the two of you are tired of living, that's more like it. Speak. Just what happened outside to force the two of you to this state?" Bai Qi was about to reply when he saw Demon Lord 3 Knights point at Jin Tai with an imposing aura. "Of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, my devil world has the 2 spirits of metal and earth. Jin Tai, you were originally a member of my devil world. Back then, you said that you would serve me, so I gave you a chance. How come you've become mute after seeing this lord? Bai Qi, shut up and speak. He was a member of the devil world." Yu Qianzhou and Deming Luan looked at Jin Tai in shock. No wonder this fellow was so inhumane. He was from the devil Dao. Jin Tai adjusted his expression and solemnly cupped his hands. "Demon Lord's eyes are like a torch. Nothing can be hidden from you. Back then, we were forced by Mu Yuanzi and the Netherworld Immortal Estate to do something we shouldn't have done. We've been under their control like puppets. All these years, we've been serving them with fear and trepidation. Who knew that they'd somehow found out that we might be your subordinates? Thus, they set up a new representative in the Immortal and Netherworld realms and tried to kill us. Now that the Immortal Palace and Netherworld Imperial Palace have been taken over, the two of us have been forced into a corner. Thus, we've come to beg Demon Lord to give us justice." As expected, none of them were easy to deal with. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, he sighed inwardly. His ability to lie was not any worse than his own. In the blink of an eye, he'd called him subordinate. His skin was really thick. If these two could make it in the future, they'd have to learn from his stepmother. "Oh." Demon Lord 3 Knights gave a lukewarm "oh" and lightly asked, "Then why don't you tell me how they forced the two of you?" His tone was full of meaning, but it was hard to tell whether he believed or not. Jin Tai immediately revealed an expression as if he'd been greatly wronged. He said indignantly, they actually supported two of their enemies to become the representatives of the immortal and netherworld realms. The two of us couldn't accept this and went to the ancient forest to find Mu Yuanzi. Who knew that Mu Yuanzi would personally attack the two of us for the sake of the immortal realm representative? As he spoke, he pulled Bai Qi over and tore off his clothes, revealing a large wound on his chest that hadn't healed yet. There was still a faint green aura on the wound. Jin Tai pointed at the wound and said indignantly, "This is the wound from Mu Yuanzi's wooden staff." Bai Qi almost lost his life because of it. The two of us were lucky enough to escape with our lives. From the looks of it, this wound is indeed caused by a wood-type treasure. Demon Lord Three Knights stared at the green scar for a while, then said, "But according to what I know, Mu Yuanzi has always stood aloof from worldly affairs in Wood Massacre Sea, and he doesn't easily kill. For the two of you to provoke him, it's clear that you have indeed angered him." It was hard to tell whether this was a suspicion or a confirmation. It was hard to be sure. He then added, "The old fellows in the Netherworld Palace have already lost their temper after being beaten by Lord Wan, Demon God. As long as the heroes of the demonic path still exist, they won't easily get involved in the disputes of the three realms. Why do you want me to believe that they've become disloyal again?" When Yu Qianzhou heard the word Wan, he felt disdain in his heart. He knew the inside story. Back then, the ones who attacked the Netherworld Palace were the ancestors of all demons, Tai Shuzheng and Ming, but Demon Lord Three Knights put the credit on his own ancestor. As expected, no one could say who was shameless. Everyone was the same. Jin Tai cupped his hands in grief and indignation. "Demon Lord, you might not know, but back then, the coiling dragon god who created the Netherworld Palace had killed a wind god. After coiling dragon god's spirit wandered, he left behind the wind god staff in the Netherworld Palace. It's a divine weapon with unparalleled power. The old fellows in the Netherworld Palace actually gave this divine weapon to the representative they supported in the Netherworld. When Demon Lord Three Realms arrives, he will know if it's real or fake. This is the best proof. The wind god staff?" Demon Lord Three Knights was shocked. He seemed to have heard of this treasure and knew how powerful it was. After frowning and thinking for a long time, he suddenly looked at the two and said arrogantly, "I understand your intentions. Since the two of you are sincere in submitting to me, then I won't pursue the past. The two of you, quickly go open the 74 demon paths of the immortal realm, netherworld realm, and human realm. When the heroes of the demon realm return to the three realms, I will definitely avenge you." Before they even begged, the other party made a promise so easily. No matter how they listened, it made them feel uneasy. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, he was instantly happy. He looked at the two acting. As expected, Jin Tai and Bai Qi's expressions became a little uncomfortable. They stuttered and didn't reply for a long time. "What?" Demon Lord Three Knights' tiger eyes suddenly widened. He snorted coldly, "Could it be that you still want to discuss some conditions with me?" With one sentence, he shut their mouths. However, when he came out, the two of them wouldn't dare to mention it even if they had 100 guts. The two of them didn't doubt that the moment Demon Lord Three Knights stepped out of the demon realm, they would be the first to be slaughtered. They probably wouldn't be able to see the matter of revenge. Jin Tai looked at Bai Qi. Bai Qi used the opportunity to straighten his clothes to organize his thoughts. Then, he bowed and said, "Demon Lord is wise. Back then, the two of us did something we shouldn't have done. We have always been fearful of Demon Lord's might and lived in constant fear. Now that we have no other choice, in order to save our lives, we are trembling with fear and seek an audience with Demon Lord. It's not that the two of us are greedy, but that the two of us really want to continue managing the immortal realm and netherworld realm for Demon Lord. We want to complete Demon Lord's unfinished business in order to redeem ourselves. Please, Demon Lord, give the two of us another chance." Chapter 1134. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the person involved. What does it mean to be able to summon clouds with one turn of the hand and rain with another? Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but admire this demon king 3 nights. As expected, he lived up to his reputation. Even though he was sealed in the demon world, he was still able to tame Jin Tai and Bai Qi. These two fellows, who originally wanted to bargain, could no longer see the confidence they had in their hands. The faint scholarly smile on Bai Qi's face disappeared. No matter how luxurious Jin Tai's clothes were, it was all fake. He was clearly the one who had the upper hand, but with just a few words, he was forced to bow his head and beg. I understand what the two of you mean. You're afraid that I'll burn the bridge after crossing it, so you want this Lord's promise, right? Demon Lord 3 Nights calmly looked at the two and said lightly, fine. I promise you, after this, I will let the two of you continue to manage the immortal and netherworld for me, and I will not make things difficult for you again. Bai Qi and Jin Tai looked at each other in dismay. If this kind of promise could go in one ear and out the other, the two of them would have died countless times already. How could they still be alive now? Seeing that the two were still hesitating, Demon Lord 3 Nights, who clearly knew what was going on, pressed on, could it be that you don't believe this Lord's promise? At this point, Bai Qi gritted his teeth and cupped his fists. Demon Lord, please understand. This subordinate naturally believes in the Demon Lord's promise, but there are surely many people in the demon world who want to kill us. In order to preserve our lives, we must be cautious. The two of us wish to ask the demon monarch for a life-saving talisman. If the demon monarch swears in the name of the demon god to ensure our safety, I believe that none of the heroes of the demon world would dare to violate the demon monarch's oath. The two of us can also be at ease and wholeheartedly serve the demon monarch. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. What were you doing earlier? They were here to haggle, and everyone knew that the other party was not a kind person. They should have laid the matter out long ago. Why did they have to humiliate themselves? Impudent! Demon King 3 Nights roared angrily, how dare you? Do you think the two of you are worthy of making me swear in the name of Lord Devil God? Who was it that made the Demon King so angry? I wonder if they can share the Demon King's burden. Another person's voice suddenly came from the obsidian light mirror, causing everyone present to be taken aback. Yu Qianzhou's brows moved slightly, feeling that this voice was familiar. Demon Lord 3 Nights looked at the entrance of the palace and saw a handsome young man dressed in black robes bowing at the entrance. The anger on his face eased as he asked, "Why are you here?" The elegant young man replied respectfully, "The Devil Monarch has sent me a large number of people for my cultivation. Naturally, I have to thank him." Demon Lord 3 Nights waved his hand and said, "This is what I should do, no need to be so polite." He then pointed at the empty space in front of him and said, "You came at the right time. Someone actually dared to make me swear in the name of Lord Devil God to protect them. Come up and take a look at them. Remember them for me. If there is a chance in the future, don't let a single one of them go." The elegant young man looked around the palace but did not see anyone or anything out of the ordinary. Remembering that Demon Lord 3 Nights had asked him to go up and take a look, he walked up to the blood jade throne with a puzzled expression. As he walked, he said with a faint smile, "Then I want to see who is courting death, actually daring to have designs on Lord Devil God." He maintained a respectful attitude as he slowly ascended the platform. After bowing to Demon Lord 3 Nights who was sitting on the blood jade throne, he slowly turned around and was stunned. He did not see anything at the entrance of the palace, so when he turned around after ascending the platform, he saw a realistic image in the air. There were 4 people looking at him in bewilderment. Yu Qianzhou was wondering whose voice was so familiar. When he saw someone ascend the high platform and turn around, his mind buzzed when he saw the other person's appearance. He cried out in shock, "Yan Zhuixing!" Bai Qi, Jin Tai, and Deming Luan all turned around to look at him in confusion. When the elegant young man in the image saw Yu Qianzhou's appearance, he was also stunned. He had been wondering if he had seen the wrong person, but when he heard the other party clearly call out his name, he cried out almost at the same time, "Niu Yud." Bai Qi and De Mingluan both knew that Niu Yud was Yu Qianzhou, but Jin Tai had always thought that Yu Qianzhou was Niu Yud. However, this did not affect the three's judgment. The elegant young man beside Demon Lord Three Knights recognized Niu Yud, and Niu Yud also recognized that elegant young man. However, what made the three of them confused was how Niu Yud knew someone who was sealed in the demon realm. Furthermore, it was obvious that he knew someone who was close to the Demon Lord Three Knights. This was simply too inconceivable. How could someone who was separated by two realms know each other? Let alone them, even Demon Lord Three Knights was stunned. He pointed at Yu Qianzhou and asked Yan Zhuixing, "You know him?" "Niu Yud. Of course I know him. Even if he turned to dust, I would still recognize him." The elegant young man stared at Yu Qianzhou with a twisted expression and sneered, "To be more precise, he is the Yu Qianzhou that I told Demon Lord about. He is that despicable, shameless, lowly, and unscrupulous Yu Qianzhou that forced me to my death. He is that Yu Qianzhou that plays tricks and doesn't dare to show his face. How could I not know him? I know him too well." Back then, Yan Zhuixing was forced into the demon realm by Yu Qianzhou in the Thousandly Lake under Demon Realm's Obedient Island. When he first arrived in the demon realm, he had indeed suffered a lot. Not to mention the fact that he was unfamiliar with the place, perhaps because of his character, he couldn't meet a good person, so he could only fight with his life on the line. Those who hadn't seen it would never be able to imagine how miserable he was. When he was in desperate straits, he had mentioned to his opponents that he was the successor of the Demon Realm's Demon Lord. However, they could tell that he was an idiot who knew nothing about the Demon Realm. He didn't even know where the Demon Palace was, yet he dared to lie. Only a ghost would believe that he was from the Demon Palace. Naturally, they would kill him and steal his treasures. However, Yan Zhuixing relied on the Demon Blade's divine ability to protect his master. It could be said that he had escaped from death every time. However, every time he suffered, he would curse Yu Qianzhou in his heart. If Yu Qianzhou knew about this, he would definitely understand why he was always met with misfortune in the celestial realm. Fortunately, when Yan Zhuixing was besieged by a large group of people, he met someone who knew his stuff. He could tell that the cultivation technique he used was the orthodox Great Fiend Celestial technique of the Devil Palace's Fiend Celestial lineage. After the news was reported, it alarmed a demon king who had followed the demon god to conquer the three realms. When she arrived, she immediately saw that the treasure in Yan Zhuixing's hands was the demon god's divine weapon and demon blade. She was immediately shocked. Others didn't know about the demon blade, but as the demon god's close subject, she knew. Even the current demon king Three Knights couldn't easily control the demon blade. This was because the demon blade had a demon spirit. Unless one was recognized by the demon god, it was impossible for the demon blade to recognize him as its master. In addition, although the demon god technique wasn't very good, it was very authentic. What's more, the demon king actually detected a terrifying aura that belonged to the demon god personally from Yan Zhuixing's body. She had followed the demon god for so many years, it was hard for her to mistake the demon god's aura. All of this was too shocking for her. In other words, this unlucky young man was actually someone who had the attention of the demon god in the god realm. To be more precise, this person should be the demon god's inheritor. Facing the demon blade, the demon king didn't have any thoughts of stealing the divine weapon and killing him. This was because she understood what it meant to have the demon blade in this young man's hands. She also understood how terrifying the demon god was. The demon god actually chose this person from the god realm and personally protected him. This meant that although the demon god was in the god realm, he could attack anyone who harmed his inheritor in the lower realm at any time. With the demon king's help, naturally, all the problems were no longer problems. The suffering that Yan Zhuixing had suffered in the demon world naturally became a thing of the past. In an instant, the bitterness was over and the sweetness was coming. After some preferential treatment and comfort, the Demon King quickly sent him to the Demon Palace's Demon King 3 Knights. The Demon King 3 Knights was also shocked. He couldn't help but ask about Yan Zhuixing's background. After a series of questions, he found out that Yan Zhuixing was a weirdo created by a demon book that he had given out at a critical moment. What was rare and commendable was that Yan Zhuixing was able to endure the cruel torture of the 7-star acupuncture technique, which was something that only 1 in a million people could endure. His talent in cultivating the demon god technique was obvious. It was no wonder that the ancestors of the god realm favored him and bestowed him with a divine weapon or demon blade. Yan Zhuixing found out that this Demon King 3 Knights was the expert from the demon world who had sent the demon book to the human world. Furthermore, he was the paragon that led the demon world. He was overjoyed and wanted to recognize this person as his master. If it was any other time, the Demon King 3 Knights would have accepted it. However, Yan Zhuixing had already inherited the demon god's legacy. How would he dare to accept this disciple? The ancestors of the demon god were watching from the unseen world. Furthermore, the demon god's seniority was even higher than his, so he explained the reason to Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing didn't even dream that he would become the direct disciple of the famous demon god that he had never seen before in the blink of an eye. He really wondered if he was dreaming. What was even more unexpected was that the 3 Knights Demon Lord gathered the 36 great demon kings under him and held a closed-door meeting to discuss the matter of abdicating his position to Yan Zhuixing. The old men who had followed the demon god all those years ago also unanimously agreed. Yan Zhuixing was obviously happy to have such a good thing happen, but he wasn't an idiot. He didn't let his happiness get to his head. He naturally understood that it was a joke for an outsider with no foundation and shallow cultivation to suddenly jump out and want to lead the demon world. They were only doing it because of the demon god that he didn't know existed. To be honest, he had never seen the demon god before, so he didn't have any confidence. Furthermore, the hardships he had experienced in the demon world made him deeply understand the cruelty of the demon world. How could it be safer than leaning on a tree that could shelter him from the wind and rain? Thus, he tried his best to refuse and supported the Demon King 3 Knights with abnormal firmness. If he didn't accept, everyone had no choice. In the end, the Demon King 3 Knights suggested that Yan Zhuixing be the next Demon King's successor. Furthermore, if Yan Zhuixing wanted to, he could ascend to the throne and lead the demon world at any time. Chapter 1135. After that, 3 Knights Demon Monarch could be said to have greatly supported Yan Zhuixing. He ordered the entire demon realm to search for the materials that Yan Zhuixing needed to cultivate his demonic arts, pushing Yan Zhuixing's cultivation to rise rapidly. In a short few years, Yan Zhuixing's cultivation had risen to the late stage of Demon General. At this threshold, the momentum of his cultivation was gradually curbed, unable to break through. The so-called late stage of Demon General corresponded to the late stage of High Immortal. The cultivation of the demon realm was also divided into 4 stages: Demon Soldier, Demon General, Demon King, and Great Demon King. They corresponded to the Immortal Realm's Small Immortal, High Immortal, Great Immortal, and Immortal Emperor, and the Netherworld Knight, Netherworld Sage, Netherworld Venerable, and Netherworld Emperor. Because of this, there was the scene of enemies on a narrow road in the Obsidian Underworld Light Mirror. The 2 enemies could be said to have their own destinies. Getting back to the main topic, everyone could hear the sinister tone in Yan Zhuixing's gritted teeth, making them shudder. They couldn't help but wonder how big of a grudge he had. To be able to make a person hate another to this extent. Immediately, everyone's gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. Not only did they not know how the 2 of them got to know each other, they also didn't know when and where the 2 of them had formed such a huge grudge. After Jin Tai examined his face, he said in astonishment, "You're Yu Qianqiu? Yu Qianqiu is actually you? Why are you covering your face? Speaking of which, Jin Tai and Yu Qianqiu really weren't enemies. Furthermore, Jin Tai had a rather good impression of Yu Qianqiu. This was an obedient child. Thinking back to the time when he sang and danced in the Immortal Palace, he still had a deep impression of it. Yu Qianqiu was his person. But thinking back, this fellow actually became disrespectful to him after changing his appearance. Furthermore, he was suspected of plotting something. The most hateful thing was that the Great Bright will actually help Yu Qianqiu to deceive him. As expected, once the Immortal Palace collapsed, the people's hearts would scatter. Jin Tai stared coldly at the Great Bright Wheel and understood everything with a little thought. F***ck. How could he meet this enemy in such a situation? What the hell? Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly at Jin Tai. He knew that there was no point in continuing to hide it, so he quickly took off the disguise on his face in front of everyone from the immortal and demon realms. He put away the cheap and high-quality human skin mask that could fool the gods and ghosts. He couldn't help but sigh. No matter how thick something was in this world, it couldn't be thicker than human skin. He turned to Yan Juexing and waved his hand. Yan Juexing. Long time no see. How have you been? One was gnashing his teeth, wishing he could skin the other alive, while the other was calm. Their completely different attitudes immediately made Jin Tai and the rest understand that Yan Juexing, who was by the side of the three knights Demon King, had obviously suffered a great loss at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Otherwise, he would not have acted like this. Because of this, Jin Tai and Bai Qi couldn't help but worry. Although they didn't know how Yu Qianqiu and Yan Juexing got to know each other and formed such a deep grudge, they couldn't help but worry that the grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Yan Juexing would ruin their plans. Good. Thanks to you, it's very good. Yan Juexing was full of resentment. His family had been destroyed by Yu Qianqiu. He wanted to rush out and kill Yu Qianqiu right now, but he couldn't understand what this strange scene meant. He forcefully restrained himself and bowed to the three knights Demon King, asking, "May I ask, Demon King? What's going on?" The three knights Demon King raised his hand slightly and didn't rush to reply. Instead, he carefully looked at Yu Qianqiu. He had heard Yan Juexing talk about this Yu Qianqiu before, but he didn't expect that such a small character could force the demon god of the immortal realm to make a move. After pondering for a while, his gaze fell on Jin Tai and Bai Qi. He raised his hand and introduced Yan Juexing, saying, "This is the successor of the demon world's demon lord. He is temporarily the vice palace lord of the demon palace. Quickly greet him." Jin Tai and Bai Qi were shocked, and they couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu. They thought, what exactly did this fellow do to actually offend the next successor of the Devil Dimension's Devil Lord to such an extent? The two of them cupped their hands at Yan Juexing in bewilderment. "Greetings, Vice Palace Lord Yan." Yu Qianqiu's face twitched, and he started cursing in his heart. This bastard actually became the successor of the demon world's demon lord, and he even became the Vice Palace Lord of the Demon Palace. Wasn't he climbing a little too fast? What kind of logic was this? He then thought of the demon god's background and immediately cursed the demon god's ancestors in his heart. The Great Bright Wheel, who had been silent all this while, felt his scalp go numb. He secretly cursed this troublemaking guy. Of all people to offend, he actually offended the demon world. Furthermore, the one he offended was the Vice Palace Lord of the Demon Palace, the successor of the Demon Lord. He had already offended the people in power in the immortal and netherworld. Now, the demon world was added to the mix. This guy was simply a star of calamity. Did he still want to live? In a flash, he thought of Wei Chuanqiu and the others. He felt that out of all people, they just had to meet this guy. This time, everyone had fallen into a pit that they couldn't climb out of. What should they do? At this moment, the Demon Lord Three Knights gave a rough explanation of the current strange scene to Yan Juexing. Yan Zhuixing was slightly surprised. He didn't think that Yu Qianzhou was doing so well. He actually ran to the immortal world to mingle with the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld. Of course, Yan Zhuixing still didn't know that Yu Qianzhou was just an empty shell. How could he be as solid as Yan Zhuixing in the demon world? However, after knowing that the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld only had such a weak position in front of the demon lord 3 knights, he couldn't help but sneer. He tilted his head and stared at Yu Qianzhou with a sinister gaze. Seeing this, a certain someone thought that something was wrong. This guy wanted to use his position to get revenge. Jin Tai and Bai Qi understood and looked at each other. Yan Zhuixing bowed to the demon lord 3 knights and said, "Demon Lord. Forgive Yan Zhuixing for being blunt, but we naturally have to respect Sir Demon God. However, I believe that Sir Demon God doesn't want to see us descendants tarnish his prestige. I believe that Sir Demon God also wants to see the Demon Dao once again rule the 3 realms. That would be the greatest respect to him." Thus, Yan Zhuixing believes that as long as Bai Qi and Jin Tai can reopen the passage to the demon world, there is no harm in agreeing to them. Jin Tai and Bai Qi were overjoyed when they heard this, but Yu Qianzhou and Deming Luan's expressions changed. The demon lord 3 knights looked at the respectful Yan Zhuixing with deep meaning. After thinking for a while, he slowly nodded and said, "That makes sense." However, Yan Zhuixing wants to add another condition to Bai Qi and Jin Tai. Yan Zhuixing quickly followed up and said, "Demon Lord, please allow it." The moment he said this, everyone's gaze faintly looked at Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou's expression was hazy. The demon lord 3 knights glanced at Yu Qianzhou and said with a faint smile, "I agree. If you have any conditions, just tell them." Yan Zhuixing suddenly turned around and pointed at Yu Qianzhou without hesitation. He glared at Bai Qi and Jin Tai and said decisively, "You heard the demon lord's words. I want you to capture this thief alive as a greeting gift." As expected, Yu Qianzhou immediately stomped his feet and scolded, "Bastard! Laozi knew you were going to use your position to take revenge. It's not that easy to kill Laozi. Just you wait. If I can take care of you in the past, I can still take care of you in the future." He couldn't finish his sentence. Deming Luan was protecting him by his side. Jin Tai had already turned around without hesitation and said indifferently, "Yu Qianzhou. You actually dared to lie to this sovereign. Fine. Today, I'll take you as a greeting gift to Vice Palace Lord Yan." Yu Qianzhou immediately scolded, "Jin Tai. You even believed Yan Zhuixing's nonsense. Once you let them out, you will never be able to turn the tables." Yu Qianzhou. Bai Qi hesitated for a while before indifferently interjecting, "Why don't you stay here for now? Vice Palace Lord Yan didn't say that he would kill you. If there are any grudges between you two, why don't you sit down and slowly resolve them? Maybe Vice Palace Lord Yan will forgive me. It would be strange if he had a good ending in Yan Zhuixing's hands." Yu Qianzhou didn't expect the 2 of them to fall out so quickly. They didn't even give him a chance to explain. He flew into a rage and said, "Don't worry your head. For Wan Ling to fall for a man like you is her misfortune. Laozi will remember today's debt." Jin Tai snorted coldly. The way he looked at Yu Qianzhou was like an eagle looking at a chick. It seemed like he could capture him effortlessly. Bai Qi's face was also somewhat distorted by Yu Qianzhou's scolding. He said in a deep voice, "Let's talk after you stay here." He opened his palm and created a gust of wind. "Stay my ass. What are you?" Yu Qianzhou placed his hand on Deming Luan's shoulder. A frighteningly hot purple flame suddenly burst out from his body. A surging wave of purple flames appeared in front of everyone. Jin Tai and Bai Qi cried out in surprise, "Purple flames!" Protective Qi quickly surged out from their bodies to protect themselves. At the same time, Bai Qi's 5 claws were enveloped in a thin layer of light. His 5 claws moved as fast as lightning toward the purple flames, but he missed. The purple flames were also extinguished in an instant. The two of them could no longer see the figures of Yu Qianqiu and Deming Luan. Bai Qi looked around and shouted angrily, "Search! I've set up a formation here. He can't escape." The two figures, one gold and one white, quickly spread out and released their powerful divine sense to search the valley. The demon monarch 3 knights in the obsidian light mirror slowly stood up. He crossed his arms and muttered, "He can actually control the purple flames. How rare." He turned back to look at Yan Zhuixing, who was staring fixedly at the void mirror. Not long after, Jin Tai and Bai Qi returned with gloomy expressions. They didn't need to guess to know that Yu Qianqiu had escaped. Yan Zhuixing asked sternly, "Where is he? Where did he go? Capture him for me. I want him alive." The two of them had unsightly expressions. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be able to escape right under their noses. For a moment, they didn't know how to reply. Bai Qi was even in a daze. He thought back to what the underworld saintess had said in the Nether Royal Palace. She had always been expressing goodwill to Yu Qianqiu, but now, he couldn't help but wonder if he had missed something with his actions just now. Demon Monarch 3 Knights loosened his arms and lightly patted Yan Zhuixing's shoulder. Yan Zhuixing immediately realized that he had lost his composure. He restrained his emotions and respectfully stood to the side. Demon Monarch 3 Knights turned around and looked at the two of them in the mirror with a dignified expression. He said with an imposing manner, "I swear in the name of Lord Demon God that as long as the two of you open the sealed passage to the demonic world, this Lord will agree to your conditions." Chapter 1136. The two, who thought that the matter was over, couldn't help but be overjoyed when they heard this. They bowed and said, "Thank you, Demon Monarch, for your help. To open the seal of the demon world, both sides should have agreed on a time and place to open the passage to the demon world first." However, the current situation was not up to Jin Tai and Bai Qi to decide. Furthermore, Yu Qianqiu had already escaped, so they were afraid that this secret would be leaked. Thus, the two decided to contact Demon Monarch 3 Knights after confirming the location. After Bai Qi and Jin Tai left, the void mirror image in the demon palace naturally disappeared. Demon Monarch 3 Knights looked at Yan Zhuixing and said with a faint smile, "Yu Qianqiu can hide for a while, but he can't hide forever. When my demon world army returns to the 3 realms, it won't take much effort to catch him. At that time, he will be at your disposal." "Yes." Yan Zhuixing said respectfully, "Demon Monarch, please understand." Yan Zhuixing lost his composure. Demon Monarch 3 Knights didn't try to comfort him anymore. He suddenly looked outside the palace and said in a deep voice, "Men." His voice reverberated outside the demon palace, and the blood clouds on the roof surged. "Present." Eunuch Li instantly appeared in the palace to receive the order. Demon Monarch 3 Knights flung off his scarlet cape and waved his hand in high spirits. "Pass down the order, order the 36 great demon kings to quickly come to the demon palace. We have important matters to discuss." "Yes." Eunuch Li accepted the order and quickly left. In the underground base of the Divine Ruin Realm, the two people who were fleeing suddenly appeared. Deming Luan looked around and couldn't help but pat his chest in relief. That was close. That was close. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, had a gloomy expression on his face. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked in circles with his head lowered. No one knew what he was thinking. When the people around him saluted him, he simply waved his hand to dismiss them. Seeing his absent-minded appearance, Deming Luan couldn't help but frown. "When did you offend the demon world's vice palace master?" He couldn't help but complain in his tone. Since he had offended the vice palace master of the demon palace, he still followed Bai Qi and Jin Tai to contact Demon Monarch 3 Knights. Damn it! That guy was lucky enough to escape with his life. I was the one who beat him to the point that he escaped into the demon world. Who knew that he would become the Vice Palace Lord of the Demon Palace? In my opinion, the Vice Palace Lord of the Demon Palace is too worthless. It doesn't matter if it's a human or a dog. Yu Qianqiu spat. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way. Deming Luan looked around once again, and sighed with emotion. Looks like we can only temporarily hide in the ruins of God. Fortunately, the ruins of God can't be entered from the outside for a short period of time, so we are temporarily safe. However, the people of the three realms are probably going to suffer. Damn it! Jin Tai and Bai Qi, those two bastards. No! We still have time. We still have a chance to stop them. Yu Qianqiu seemed to have thought of something, and he shouted at the top of his lungs, Zhangpeng. 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 He grabbed a subordinate who had just passed by and said anxiously, "Tell Zhangpeng to come see me quickly." Seeing that he was so anxious, the subordinate hurriedly said yes and ran away. With him shouting at the top of his lungs, Wei Chuanxiu and Yunpeng quickly flashed out from the passageway in the depths of the base. Wei Chuanxiu opened his mouth and scolded, "What are you shouting for? Are you in a hurry to reincarnate?" Yu Qianqiu still had a calm expression as he walked in circles with his hands behind his back. Deming Luan immediately gave a rough account of what had happened. Wei Chuanxiu and Yunpeng sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. They never thought that Jin Tai and Bai Qi would actually be so crazy that they wanted to open the demon world and release the demon world army led by Demon King 3 Knights. Especially when they found out that Yu Qianqiu had actually offended the Vice Palace Lord of the Demon Palace, and that the other party had sworn to kill him, the two of them couldn't help but look at each other in dismay, not knowing what to say. The two of them couldn't imagine how this guy had made so many enemies, and all of them had such powerful backgrounds. How did he even offend the people of the demon world? Not long after, Zhangpeng quickly flashed in from outside and bowed, "Master." Without waiting for him to say anything more, Yu Qianqiu's eyes revealed a fierce glint as he said sternly, "Immediately gather everyone to enter the first level of combat readiness, and await orders at any time." Zhangpeng was startled, then quickly bowed and said, "Yes." His face revealed an incomparably excited expression, the kind of excitement that a soldier would have when he smelled the scent of blood after a long drought. Without saying anything else, he slipped away like a wisp of smoke. Wei Chuanxiu strode over and shook his head, saying, "With just these people under you, you want to fight against the demon world army? I'm afraid." Before he could finish, he found that Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared, and no one knew where he had run off to. In the human world, halfway up the mountain behind the mountain god temple where the Hong Gang and Qing Gang's headquarters were located, Yu Qianqiu's voice suddenly sounded, "Hong Qi, Gu Qingyun, come out." Hearing the voice, a figure rushed out from a side room and quickly bowed to Yu Qianqiu, saying, "Master. Why are you here?" It was Hong Qi, holding a pot of wine in his hand. His mouth was glistening with oil, and his hands were also greasy. When he spoke, his mouth still reeked of wine. He must be living a good life. Where did Gu Qingyun go? Yu Qianqiu used his divine sense to scan the surroundings, but he didn't find Gu Qingyun's figure. Hong Qi replied with a smile, "Last time, after gathering all the cultivators in the human world who know alchemy, Gu Qingyun felt that it was necessary to make a record of all the cultivators in the human world. In case anything happens in the future, it would be convenient for him to check at any time. He is doing that now." "Good. This is a good idea. I really didn't choose the wrong person." Halfway through his praise, Yu Qianqiu noticed Hong Qi's image. His eyes widened, and he kicked Hong Qi. Exasperated that Hong Qi didn't meet his expectations, he poked his head and scolded, "Eat. You only know how to eat, you good for nothing. There will be a time when you can't eat anymore. Learn more from Gu Qingyun." Hong Qi hurriedly took a few steps back, flung the wine pot in his hand, and rubbed his aching head. He smiled obsequiously and said, "Master. Is there something you need from us? Yu Qianzhou was in a hurry and didn't have time to scold him. His face darkened, and he said with an ominous glint in his eyes, "Send a message to Gu Qingyun. The two of you immediately order all the cultivators in the cultivation world to gather at the World Commerce's cornucopia as soon as possible. If anyone disobeys, kill without mercy." Hong Qi's expression turned solemn, and he immediately realized that something big had happened. He replied seriously, "Master. There are over 1 million cultivators in the entire cultivation world. You have to at least give them some time. I'm afraid it's impossible to gather them all in a short period of time." Give them time? Didn't I tell you to do it as soon as possible? It was as if Yu Qianzhou had eaten a bomb, falling out with him at the drop of a hat. He pointed at his nose and scolded sternly, "When did you learn to haggle? What are you Hong Gang and Qin Gang raising so many people for? If there's a way, you have to do it. If there's no way, you have to do it well. Do as you see fit. Gather all the cultivators as soon as possible. If anyone disobeys, kill them all." "Yes." Hong Qi's scalp went numb, and he said, "I'll do it right now." Who knew that just as he turned around, he heard his master shout again, "Wait. I haven't finished speaking, why are you in such a hurry?" Hong Qi hurriedly turned back and looked at him obediently. "There's something between you and Gu Qingyun, I need someone to personally go and settle it for me," Yu Qianzhou said slowly with a deep voice. Seeing him like this, Hong Qi was more or less nervous and asked, "What is it?" Yu Qianzhou clasped his hands behind his back, and his gaze suddenly turned to the far east. An image of an island appeared in his mind, and with a malevolent expression, he said, "Quickly capture Yan Zhuixing's mother and sister and hide them well. Don't let anyone know where they are hidden. Who knows, they might be of great use to us. If anyone dares to stop us, kill them without any hesitation. The most important thing is to capture them. Do you remember what I said?" He turned back and stared at Hong Qi. Hong Qi instantly let out a sigh of relief. So that's what it was. He immediately patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry, master. Our Hong Gang and Qin Gang are the best at this. I'll personally go to Fuxian Island. If you mess this up, you'll be crying." Yu Qianzhou snorted and disappeared on the spot. Seeing that his master had left, Hong Qi's tense nerves relaxed, and he exhaled and said, "Oh my God. With master's current cultivation, why did he cause such a huge commotion? What is he trying to do? Yan Zhuixing's mother and sister? Could it be that Yan Zhuixing came out to cause trouble again?" Then he shook his head and didn't dare to delay. He knew that his master was easy to talk to when he was easy to talk to, but when he was ruthless, even he couldn't handle it. In the valley outside of illusionary Immortal City, Yu Qianzhou, who had just appeared, checked the surroundings and quickly changed his appearance to Niu Yud's. He flew towards the direction of illusionary Immortal City without hesitation. In the clouds above illusionary Immortal City, there were still flowing lights everywhere. Although the Immortal Palace had collapsed, it was only the Immortal Palace's forces that had collapsed. It didn't have much to do with the other sections. They just changed to another sect and became the supreme one. Moreover, Jintai and Baiqi hadn't been caught yet, so the Heartless Palace's main focus wasn't on shuffling the cards. If Jintai and Baiqi had been caught, then it would be hard to say. In short, the various sects weren't affected much. Yu Qianzhou passed through the clouds and floated in the sky. He looked down at the still flourishing illusionary Immortal City and couldn't help but sneer. A disaster was really imminent. His gaze searched for the original location of the Heartless Palace's branch, but he realized that after he burned it down, it was cleaned up and there were no signs of it being rebuilt. He then looked at the conspicuous spot where the Chamber of Commerce Alliance used to be and realized that a magnificent palace had been built. He immediately understood everything. This palace was probably built by the Heartless Palace. Otherwise, no one would dare to occupy this treasured land of Feng Shui. He took out a large pile of paper and scattered them with both hands. Instantly, they flew towards the illusionary immortal city like snowflakes. These were all flyers that he had ordered people to hurry up and print. This wasn't the end. As he flew, he scattered a few more piles. There were over 10,000 of them. After he was done, he disappeared in the sky. When he reappeared, he was already at the foot of the abandoned World Commerce Alliance's mountain. Only then did he slowly fly towards the center of illusionary immortal city. He wanted to see how the commotion he had caused was. Chapter 1137. When he arrived, the central square of the illusory immortal city was already in chaos. Flowing lights fluttered about like countless blooming fireworks, and figures flew off in all directions. There were even white pieces of paper that surged with the wind in the sky but refused to descend for a long time, and people would occasionally fly over and grab them away. Chaos. Chaos. The entire hallucinatory immortal city was filled with exclamations like boiling water. Whether flying in the sky or running on the ground, as long as they were in a hurry, they would all have a white flyer in their hands. The bustling and crowded plaza instantly became much sparser. What was left was a bunch of wandering cultivators holding flyers in their hands. They didn't belong to any sect, so they didn't need to report anything to anyone. Yu Qianqiu, who arrived late, was very satisfied with this result. This was the result he wanted. He flashed into the plaza and walked to the side of the sighing wandering cultivators. He cupped his fists and pointed at the chaos around him. Everyone. I don't know what happened, how did it cause such a big commotion? It's you. I know you. One of them suddenly pointed at Yu Qianqiu and exclaimed. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and was startled. Before he could react, the other cupped his fists and smiled. Did sire forget? When the Merchant Alliance was attacked by Heartless Palace's consecrator Fang Yi, you also asked me a question. He pointed at the former location of the Merchant Alliance. So that's how you know, you gave me a fright. Yu Qianqiu made an "oh" sound and immediately reacted. Recalling that he pulled someone over to ask a question back then, he slapped his forehead and said with a smile, I remember, what a coincidence. I didn't expect to be asked about you again. He pointed at the surroundings and asked, what happened? When the others heard this, they all sighed and shook their heads. That person handed the flyer to Yu Qianqiu and said, I don't know if it's true or not. If it's true, it will be very troublesome. Yu Qianqiu pretended to take the flyer and recited the content as if he knew it by heart. The three realms are in an emergency. Jin Tai and Bai Qi were unwilling to accept defeat. They were about to reopen the sealed passage to the demon world and release the demons led by Demon King 3 Knight to invade the three realms. The world was in danger. I hope that the heroes of the immortal and netherworld will put aside their personal grudges and work together to quickly defend the 74 passageways leading to the demon world. Do not let Jin Tai and Bai Qi's plot succeed, otherwise the demon path will wreak havoc in the three realms, and everyone will be in a precarious situation. Yu Qianqiu weeps blood and laments. After he finished reading, he flicked the flyer in his hand and handed it back. He looked at the others and said, Can this be trusted? I heard that Yu Qianqiu is in cahoots with Qin Tai. This is a serious matter. I'd rather believe it than not. That person took the flyer, looked at the plaza that had already become sparsely populated, and said, If it's true, then the three realms will probably flow with rivers of blood. The demon lord of 3 Knights will lead a group of demons here with resentment, and I'm afraid it's unavoidable that the three realms will be bathed in blood. He'll destroy all of the original major powers, and then establish a new order of the three realms under his rule. Think about it, if the demon path returns to the three realms and Demon King 3 Knight doesn't allow his subordinates to obtain any benefits, he won't be able to give his subordinates who have been imprisoned in the demon world for so many years. Exactly. Another person on the side nodded in agreement. He said, For us wandering cultivators, it's not a big deal. Demon King 3 Knight can't possibly kill everyone. If he really dares to do that, he'll definitely force everyone to unite and fight to the death. That'll be enough to make them suffer. What's more, the demon realm will have to leave some people behind to do the hard work. So as long as we don't get involved, us wandering cultivators will at most have to live a more difficult and lowly life in the future. What I'm really worried about are the famous sects that have taken over a region. Those people are used to being high and mighty. If you make them become dogs, it'll be more painful than killing them. The loud talk here immediately attracted some of the rogue cultivators in the surroundings to join in, and they repeatedly expressed their agreement when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the crowd and sneered in his heart. These people are really smart. They are really used to being dogs. But then again, when the immortal realm and the netherworld were in power, they did not treat them as humans either. Since they were dogs everywhere, to them, wasn't it the same to be a dog no matter who they were? Perhaps some dogs that had been mistreated before were resentful and could not wait to bite their current owners to death to vent their anger. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to take advantage of the fact that he did not know Yu Qianqiu at this time to publicly commend Yu Qianqiu's feat of not being afraid of power, because he was never stingy with praising himself. But looking at the situation, he took advantage of the crowd's indignation and quietly squeezed out of the crowd. This kind of speechlessness that was powerless to reverse the situation was not something people at his level could play with. If he had the time, he might as well do something more practical. Now that he had confirmed that the news had been spread, time was precious, and he should be busy with other things. As for what to do and how to save himself, he was now powerless to make decisions on behalf of the immortal realm and the netherworld. Under the dim sky where the sun and moon could not be seen, after the endless vicissitudes of the netherworld, the ancient and broken stone statue with the body of a snake still stood in the rustling wind. The plump breasts proved to the passers-by that it was a woman. She came from the depths of time, facing the Styx and telling the past that had been lost in the long river of history. Although it always attracted people's infinite reverie or ears to listen, no one could understand it, leaving behind some helplessness and a few eternal desolation. The arms of the statue with the body of a snake opened slightly as if to hug, and it seemed to be praying to the heavens for something, so dense snow-like pieces of paper began to fall from the sky. Ow! A long howl suddenly sounded, immediately attracting countless people in this twilight city to flash out. Immediately, they saw the sky full of paper fluttering down. Many people grabbed it in their hands to see what was on it. After seeing the content on it, they were all shocked, and Twilight City immediately became chaotic. Many people gathered together to discuss whether the matter was true or false, and many people's first reaction was to report the contents of the leaflets. However, in just a moment, although these flying leaflets were already dead, they still could not resist the corrosion of the netherworld's death aura. Not long after, they all turned into ashes. However, for the people who did this, this was enough. They just needed to spread the news. In the large area around the Divine Ruin Realm base, not to mention ferocious beasts, not even a small animal could be seen. They had either been killed by the army of heroes who had been training here for a long time, or they had been hunted by the ferocious temple rainbow spiders. In short, the area with the base as the center had become a death zone for the ferocious beasts in the Divine Ruin Realm. This place, which was covered by clouds and filled with white mist, was the training ground for the disciples of the various sects in the immortal world. Now, it had become the forbidden land of the Utopia army, and no one was allowed to set foot in it. However, the sudden appearance of foreign races could not be hidden from the people outside the fog, who had successfully cultivated and evolved into immortal beasts. In addition, Zhang Peng often led people outside the fog for combat training, so it was inevitable that there would be frequent conflicts. In the end, no one was a match for the Utopia army after several battles. Just as Zhang Peng's desire to fight was soaring and he wanted to sweep through the Divine Ruin Realm, the Great Flame Mountain Ape King Yuan Hong stopped him after hearing the news. He told Zhang Peng not to make a big deal out of this, or else he would offend the rainbow-feathered Lion King in the divine ruin realm. When Xiaofan heard that the rainbow-feathered Lion King's cultivation had reached at least the late-stage immortal emperor stage and that it had many powerful immortal beasts under its command, he embarrassedly suppressed the idea of expanding his territory. At this moment, nearly 10,000 battle-hardened heroes who had been trained by Xiaofan had gathered. All of them retreated to the vicinity of the base, fully armed, and entered the first level of combat readiness. In the underground base, Yu Qianzhou had gathered the feudal lords of the various countries. He was displaying his ability in ideological work, explaining to everyone the dangers of the demon realm's invasion of the three realms. He also told them that he had already ordered all the human cultivators to gather at the treasure bowl, preparing to help the millions of human cultivators become immortals. He was prepared to fight to the death against the demon path, swearing to not let the pure land in the human world, which had given birth to him, be trampled by the claws of the demon path. Yu Qianzhou held up the banner of Yin Baikong, who would rather die than submit to the foreign races, and shouted passionately. His ideological work could be said to be very successful, and it was very encouraging, making everyone deeply understand that they were not completely powerless to fight back. Furthermore, Yu Qianzhou also vowed that if the situation was unfavorable, he would go to the Great Snow Mountain in the Netherworld to ask the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress for help and borrow 800,000 ice soul crystals from the Great Snow Mountain to help. He also continued to use everyone's backbone, Bai Changchun, to stabilize the situation. He said that if it still did not work, he would ask his master, Bai Changchun, who was in meditation, to come forward and turn the situation around. He vowed to fight for a foothold for everyone in the immortal realm. If we still can't win like this, we're not afraid. At worst, we'll just hide back in the divine ruin realm. But I, Yu Qianzhou, am not a coward who is afraid to fight. I will definitely not be a coward if I don't fight with my life on the line. This was the last sentence that Yu Qianzhou said when he encouraged everyone. The whole thing could be summed up as a pre-war mobilization meeting. In reality, Yu Qianzhou was like a camel. If he had not been forced into a dead end by Yan Zhuixing, he would still want to take the shortcut to take advantage of the situation. Now that it was a matter of life and death, he immediately displayed his ruthlessness. He did everything, said everything, and was prepared to use all his resources and strength to fight. Fortunately, he had accumulated a lot of wealth over the years, but he did not know if it would be of much use. However, he had already made up his mind. Even if he lost, he would make the enemy feel pain. His words caused the expressions of the lords of the various countries to become incomparably grave. Everyone was proud and arrogant, and no one wanted to be a dog. Although Yu Qianzhou had treated them with kindness and authority, he had still treated them well. Moreover, Yu Qianzhou had also done his best to help them improve their cultivation. Seeing that their future was bright, no one wanted to fall into endless darkness and become inferior to pigs and dogs. Fight! Let's fight! Muffled voices rang out in the base. Although there were no heroic words, they knew that Bai Changchun, who had fought against the Celestial Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld without being defeated, was backing them up. Because Bai Changchun had never disappointed them. What's more, there were huge forces like the Immortal and Netherworld resisting the Demon World's army together. No one felt that there was anything to be afraid of. Chapter 1138. To put it bluntly, these old foxes subconsciously took it for granted that even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone taller to hold it up. What was there to be afraid of? At most, they could just hide back in the divine ruin realm. This was the effect that Yu Qianzhou wanted. He had never thought that he could really make these guys risk their lives without any distracting thoughts. If he put himself in their shoes, he would not do that. Now, he was trying his best to motivate them to go to the battlefield with confidence. He wanted to maintain their morale before the battle and do his best to help them prepare for the battle. As for after the battle, it was not up to them. The reason for doing this was very simple. The messy rogue cultivators in the human cultivation world had long been gathered by Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. It was not difficult to restrain them. However, he or his Utopia army could not control nearly 1 million cultivators from various forces. The number was too large. However, most of those people were the subordinates or disciples of the feudal lords of various countries. Therefore, he needed to rely on the prestige of the feudal lords to command and manage them. Otherwise, before the battle started, he would be in chaos. Deming Luan, Wei Chuanxiu, and Yun Peng looked at each other. They did not expect Yu Qianzhou to be from the human world and be able to gather such a huge force at any time. What surprised them the most was that Bai Changchun was Yu Qianzhou's master. Er Xuejuan and Ji Wu were also shocked. Although they knew that Bai Changchun was Yu Qianzhou's master, they did not expect Yu Qianzhou to be able to mobilize such a huge force at any time. He wanted to help millions of cultivators in the human world become immortals. What kind of feeling was this? Nongzhu and Lu Yanqing were the two who were the most emotional. Looking at Yu Qianzhou's impassioned speech to the crowd, they could not help but think of the guy who had fled for his life in the cultivation world back then. Now, he had indeed become famous. As for Yan Zhuixing, he was even more impressive. He actually became the next successor of the Devil King and the current Vice Palace Lord of the Devil Palace. The two fellows who had fought to the death in the cultivation world all those years ago were about to have a head-on confrontation once more. However, the strength they could mobilize and the situation of the battle were no longer their personal matters, but the fate of the three realms. They didn't know who would emerge victorious in the end. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion. On the other hand, Zi, Ferong, and the others who had been watching from the side, when they saw Yu Qianzhou's imposing manner of leading a group of heroes into battle, their eyes more or less sparkled with little stars. Zi suddenly realized that this man didn't look that annoying, and seemed to be quite charming. Her pretty face secretly blushed, and she looked left and right. Fortunately, no one was paying attention to her right now. At this moment, a cracking sound could be heard from outside. Everyone turned to look and saw a very strange-looking person calmly walking in from the outside. They couldn't see who it was, but the person bowed to Yu Qianzhou and said, "Master, I've come to find you. Everything is ready." Only then did everyone realize that it was Zhang Peng, the person in charge of this place. They couldn't help but look at the armor on his body with interest. Because Zhang Peng had never let them see such a strange attire when he organized everyone's training, they had never seen such a strange attire. First of all, the entire armor was very close-fitting. It was clearly tailor-made. It was covered with spikes of different sizes and lengths, and there was a matching longsword stuck on the back. Only 2 eyes could be seen, and there were some small air holes between the mouth, nose, and ears. It was an extremely strange appearance. The entire body of the armor glowed with a dark light. It was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary item, but a treasured armor that had been meticulously refined. At this moment, Zhang Peng gave everyone the feeling that he was a demon that had walked out from the depths of darkness. They wanted to use their divine sense to investigate him, but they found that it was impossible to penetrate. Only by using their divine sense to penetrate through the eye sockets and air holes could they see his true appearance. Everyone suddenly saw a person dressed like this appear. Before they knew that this person was Zhang Peng, they couldn't help but feel a little scared. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly to Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng turned around and walked out, while Yu Qianzhou looked around at everyone and said, "Everyone, follow me out and take a look." Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know what Yu Qianzhou wanted them to see, but they all followed behind Yu Qianzhou and walked out. When they reached the exit of the underground base, a sharp zhi sound suddenly came from above. A multicolored figure jumped down from above, and 8 light golden claws fiercely pounced towards Zhang Peng, who was wearing armor in front of him. There was a ding-dang sound that belonged to metal. "Be careful." Someone in the crowd could not help but give a warning. The others also suddenly became alert, thinking that they had been attacked by a fierce beast from the ruins of God. Yu Qianzhou turned around and said to everyone with a faint smile, "Don't worry, it's one of us." Everyone was stunned. They saw that it was a multicolored spider that was as big as a table. Its 8 sharp claws and ferocious fangs were all light gold. If it spread its limbs, its body length would be at least 4 to 5 meters, and it had already hugged Zhang Peng under its abdomen. Zhang Peng turned around and glared at it. The multicolored spider immediately acted like a child who had done something wrong, and landed on the ground obediently. Zhang Peng flashed onto its back, and it immediately used all 8 of its legs to quickly climb out with Zhang Peng on its back. Only then did everyone believe that it was indeed one of their own, but it was a spider. When everyone walked into the valley outside the base, they immediately saw the big spider carrying Zhang Peng as if it was flying up the valley. Yu Qianzhou flew up in a flash, and everyone else followed suit. There was a large group of people standing outside the valley. They were all wearing strange armor like Zhang Peng's, and they were faintly discernible in the mist. They stood silently in the mist, and their auras were like demons that had walked out of a nightmare. It was a very shocking sight to behold. There were even many people with a multicolored spider lying beside them. Its 8 sharp claws moved restlessly, but it didn't dare to move. Its restless and unpredictable claws seemed to want to break out of the misty nightmare and pierce into the chests of the people who were sleeping. Zhang Peng had already received instructions from his master in advance. He had purposely lined up in the form of a military parade to show off his family's wealth, in order to strengthen everyone's determination to not be afraid of a battle. Zhang Peng, who was standing on top of the big spider, suddenly waved his hand and pointed to the left. Everyone couldn't help but look over. Next to a giant snake the size of a small mountain, a giant frog the size of a house, and a giant eagle resting on the ground, there was a ghost-like person in black armor standing next to each of them. Zhang Peng then waved his hand and pointed to the right. The people who were already somewhat dumbfounded looked over again. There was a giant scorpion, a giant centipede, and a strange wolf the size of a horse with scales all over its body bearing its fangs. There were all kinds of fierce beasts everywhere, and every one of them was accompanied by a ghost-like person in black armor. These huge fierce beasts took up a lot of space, and no one knew how many people and strange fierce beasts were in the depths of the mist. No one knew how much killing power these people and strange fierce beasts could unleash. Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect Yu Qianzhou to have such a team hidden in his hands. What they didn't know was that other than the colorful temple spiders, the other fierce beasts were all created by Zhang Peng. Ever since he saw the power of the 1,000 or so colorful temple spiders, Zhang Peng had led his subordinates to search for all kinds of fierce beasts that could unleash special powers and domesticate them, so that the heroic army could unleash even greater power. Hard work paid off, and they finally had a lot of gains over the years. Now that they were being displayed in front of everyone, Zhang Peng couldn't help but feel a little proud of himself. The sturdy and indestructible armor, the strong battle power of unity, and the support of all kinds of fierce and poisonous fierce beasts, this team could finally show off its abilities. Yu Qianzhou swept his gaze across the people below and looked at Zhang Peng with approval. He nodded slightly and instructed, "Have everyone prepare to fight at any time." Zhang Peng respectfully accepted the order. After that, Yu Qianzhou led everyone back to the base, stating that he wanted to get everyone a set of extraterrestrial adamantine battle armor with extremely strong defense, which immediately made everyone excited. Thus, under Yu Qianzhou's guidance, everyone began to measure each other's measurements, and recorded their measurements in a jade archive before handing it over to him. Even Wei Chuanxiu and the others couldn't help but join in. Only Immortal Crocodile, Ji Wu, and Lu Yanqing didn't join in the fun. Immortal Crocodile wanted a set as well, but he was now a cripple, and his cultivation was sealed by Jintai's secret technique. He hadn't found anyone who could remove the seal yet, so it was useless even if he wanted it. Ji Wu, on the other hand, was a little embarrassed to join in. Lu Yanqing, on the other hand, wasn't someone who hated fighting and killing, so she didn't want this evil-looking battle armor at all. As for the envious Ze and the others, they were chased to the side by Yu Qianqiu, telling them to stay where they wanted to be. The girls had a temper, but they knew that this wasn't the time to be disobedient, so they could only go to the side and curse someone. After he was done, Yu Qianqiu pulled Nongzhu along and found the few subordinates who had protected Shi Wenguang in the past. He asked for a human skin mask that was suitable for Nongzhu, stuffed a silver ball into Nongzhu's hand, and asked her to go to the mystic immortal city to gather information. Because he still had use for the others, he had to bring them back to the human realm to stabilize the hearts of their own subordinates. Nongzhu was a commander without an army, and she was more trustworthy, so he could only trouble her. After sending Nongzhu to the mystic immortal city, Yu Qianqiu quickly returned to the divine ruin realm and rushed to the great flaming mountain to find Elder Nanming and Yuan Hong, telling them about the impending invasion of the devil realm. Taking advantage of the fact that the two of them were still in a state of shock and had yet to wake up, he took the jade archive with the measurements recorded on it and made hundreds of sets of extraterrestrial metal essence battle armor. He asked the two of them to put aside their private work of researching and refining artifacts, and to focus on the bigger picture and quickly refine these hundreds of sets of battle armor. Yuan Hong saw that his private stash of extraterrestrial metal essence was almost used up, and his heart ached terribly. However, seeing that his master, Elder Nanming, had already agreed with a solemn expression, he lost his temper and gritted his teeth to help his master refine the armor. It's so tiring to do ideological work everywhere. It's all that bastard Yan Zhuixing's fault. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, then returned to the base without stopping. He brought the hundreds of feudal lords back to the human realm and told them to disperse and return home. Then, he quickly gathered all his subordinates and gathered them at the cornucopia. He had no other choice. Other than needing the feudal lords to lead his subordinates in battle, it was also because the task of gathering millions of people was placed on Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. It would indeed be difficult to complete it in a short period of time, and he couldn't just watch from the sidelines. Chapter 1139. Within the illusory immortal city, a destitute independent cultivator's stall had a few tens of various metal carvings on it. There were all sorts of lifelike birds, beasts, people, and things, and their exquisiteness could indeed be considered as handicrafts. This seemingly destitute independent cultivator was none other than Nongzhu. These **T handicrafts were made by Yu Qianqiu at the last minute in order to fool him, and there were a few hundred of them. In Yu Qianqiu's words, "I'm not really asking you to set up a stall to sell things, and you just have to make something to deal with it. Your main task is to inquire about all sorts of information. If I really get some good things for you to sell, you won't have the time to inquire about information when your business is booming. The more you can't sell something, the better it is." Of course, Yu Qianqiu didn't ask Nongzhu to randomly pick up a few stones to make up the numbers, as he was afraid that Nongzhu would be beaten up by those who didn't like him. Instead, he made some sculptures that were at least passable. At the beginning, because of the influence of the news that the devil dimension was about to descend upon the three dimensions, the square did seem to be much more deserted. However, it was also because of the influence of that news that the flow of people suddenly increased in just a few days. Everyone came to purchase things that they could use or might use as reserves in preparation for the upcoming calamity. The entire illusory immortal city was unprecedentedly bustling, and it could even be described as overcrowded. Not to mention the various stalls on the square, even the mountains of the various sects were filled with endless streams of people. All of them were in a hurry, and the atmosphere was becoming more and more tense. There were people stopping to look at Nongzhu's stall from time to time. Most of them thought that there was something profound about these sculptures, so they asked with interest. Nongzhu was truly speechless, and he could only imitate Yu Qianqiu's words. "This is a work of art that I meticulously carved, and there's nothing profound about it." In the end, he received countless supercilious looks, and many people scolded him for thinking too much about money. He'd never been scolded by so many people in his entire life. At first, Nongzhu really couldn't take it, but as time passed, he got used to it. His attention was focused on the conversations of the people around him, and all sorts of information began to pour in. Speaking of which, the various sects had to thank Yu Qianzhou for using the teleportation function of the Golden Pearl to deliver the news in time. When the various sects received the news from their sects, they were all shocked. Almost all the forces that were close to the demonic world's passageway gathered there without any hesitation. They did their best to set up all sorts of restrictions at the sealed entrance to the demonic world to prevent the passageway from being opened. The most outrageous one was the one in the immortal world. Around the sealed passageway to the devil world, nearly 100 sects had arrived in time to set up countless formations of various sizes. As long as it was a formation that each sect knew, they would set it up regardless of the consequences. Even if it had been repeated countless times, as long as there was space nearby, they would set it up as much as they wanted. They kept setting up all kinds of restrictions. Nearly 100 sects set up formations in the sky and on the ground. It was a spectacular scene. As a result, within a radius of hundreds of miles, the heaven and earth were covered with gloomy clouds and fog. It was so dark that one couldn't even see his own fingers, let alone find the location of the entrance to the devil world. As expected, Jin Tai and Bai Qi came here. Because they were in the immortal world, the sealed entrance to the devil world was naturally the most convenient choice. Relying on their strong cultivation, the two of them directly killed their way here. As a result, when they arrived, they were also shocked by the situation in front of them. However, time waited for no man. Wang Qing must have heard the news and came here, so the two of them directly broke the formations. Rumble, rumble, rumble. None of the formations could stop them, and they were forcibly broken one after another. But no matter how powerful the two of them were, they couldn't resist the fact that there were too many formations. It took them nearly a day to break through more than 10,000 formations and forcibly advance 100 miles. The strength of the two of them could be imagined, but they still couldn't see the shadow of the sealed entrance to the devil world. The two of them were immediately dumbfounded. They finally understood what it meant to anger the public, and they finally understood the power of the masses. Jin Tai was so angry that he stomped his feet and cursed Yu Qianzhou. If it wasn't for Yu Qianzhou leaking the news, how could they encounter such an unprecedented good thing? At this time, Wang Qing also hurried over. A six-dragon snow-blue sword forced the two of them to flee again. After they left, the hundreds of sects that scattered immediately saw that it was effective, so they immediately gathered again and began to set up the formations day and night. At the same time, they quickly sent a message to the other sections. As a result, the other sects naturally followed suit. Without saying anything, they directly piled up the passages to the 72 worlds with countless formations to prevent Jin Tai and Bai Qi from breaking into the human world to open the passage to the devil world. The netherworld, which was shocked by what happened in the immortal world, quickly followed suit and piled up the passages to the devil world and the 72 worlds with countless formations. After this matter, the immortal world and the netherworld finally believed in Yu Qianzhou's warning. Wang Qing even directly announced to the whole world that Yu Qianzhou had taken great credit. From today onwards, the grievances between the Heartless Palace and Yu Qianzhou were written off. And the various forces that were scared to the point of cold sweat expressed their praises to Yu Qianzhou without hesitation. However, Yu Qianzhou himself did not expect that the various sects could come up with such a method. He had always thought that there were too many entrances to the devil world. With just the power of Wang Qing and his son, they could not take care of the east and west. So, he was still actively preparing for war. Nongzhu, who received this news, could not help but sigh. No matter what happened in the future, at least for now, it seemed that the boy really changed the fate of the three realms. Then, in view of Jin Tai and Bai Qi's unscrupulous means, under the call of the King of the Black Mountain in the Netherworld and the Heartless Palace in the Immortal World, all the forces were mobilized. They patrolled their respective territories day and night, searching for Jin Tai and Bai Qi's whereabouts. And for their own interests, everyone united unprecedentedly. At the first moment, they jointly formed the Immortal Underworld Demon Killing Alliance. The groups formed by the two realms deployed their forces as quickly as possible and divided their forces to guard the passages to the various realms. Once they found that the formations were destroyed, they immediately filled them up. Not long after, another piece of news came. Under the inescapable net formed by all the forces, they really found Jin Tai and Bai Qi's sneaky tracks in the immortal world. However, they had no way of catching the two. After the two killed many people, they easily escaped. Then, the two's tracks appeared again and again in various places, but there was nothing they could do. In the end, they were repeatedly destroyed and repaired at the same time. For a time, Jin Tai and Bai Qi were exhausted, and Wang Qing and Wu Feng, who chased the two everywhere to put out the fire, were also unbearably tired. However, in terms of cultivation and speed, they were not as good as the two's ability to escape. They really could not do anything to the two who specialized in destruction. The two sides were in a stalemate. So, someone suggested that the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld should also be stacked with a large formation to reduce the area where the two could escape. But Wang Qing and his son knew that it was useless. With the two's cultivation, no matter if they were trapped in the immortal world or the netherworld, if they wanted to escape, no one could do anything to them. In the end, because they did not do this, Jin Tai and Bai Qi finally found the opportunity. Chapter 1140. At the Cornucopia Commerce's headquarters, the god of wealth peak that still stood tall despite the damage was packed with people. The various feudal lords had gathered all their subordinates, the Green Gang and Hong Gang had gathered all the rogue cultivators from all over the world. Even China's cultivation world, which had the largest number of cultivators, had no choice but to comply. In a short time, over 1 million cultivators from all over the world had gathered here, an unprecedented grand occasion. Amidst the bustling crowd, everyone was looking around, curious and nervous at the same time. Most of them had no idea why they were here. Several hundred feudal lords and sect chiefs were having a meeting on the god of wealth peak. Considering that some feudal lords only had a few hundred or dozens of people under them, while others had tens of thousands of people under them, and some sects of different sizes were also in the same situation, the merger and reorganization began. Over 1 million cultivators were divided into 10 corps, with each corps having a little over 100,000 people. The several hundred feudal lords were divided into 9 groups, with a few people in each group as the core of each corps. The remaining corps consisted of over 100,000 rogue cultivators, all of which were added to the Hong Gang and Green Gang, under the command of Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. The Wuxia cultivation world was broken up by sections. Sects of different sizes were distributed according to the number of people, and they were all under the core subordinates of the lords of the various countries. After the meeting was over, the commanders of the 10 newly formed corps swiftly gave the order to count the cultivation level of their subordinates. One had to admit that Yu Qianzhou used these people correctly. First of all, they knew their subordinates inside out, adding to their inherent prestige. Their work efficiency was extremely high. It took less than half a day to get a detailed result after counting over 1 million people. If Yu Qianzhou were to do it himself, it would be hard for him to even sort out the people. After receiving the detailed data, Yu Qianzhou immediately distributed 1 billion divine-grade spirit stones to each of the 10 corps, throwing out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones in one go. A foundation establishment cultivator would need at most 1.4 billion high-grade spirit stones to advance to the immortal realm. Even if one were to start from the qi refining stage, it wouldn't exceed 1.5 billion high-grade spirit stones. If converted to divine-grade spirit stones, it would only be 15 pieces. Each of you will receive 15 pieces of divine-grade spirit stones. An army of 100,000 people will at most cost a little over 1 million divine-grade spirit stones. The rest of the spirit stones will be used as management expenses. When he and Zhang Peng experimented on their subordinates in Utopia, he already had first-hand data on the consumption of spirit stones. On top of that, Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun had invited cultivators from all over the world to refine countless medicinal pellets for them, so he was well prepared. After distributing the spirit stones, Huang Xiaolong quickly distributed a large number of Foundation Establishment pellets, 7 Treasures pellets, Great Restriction Breaking pellets, Marrow Cleansing pellets, and Immortal Ascension pellets according to the statistics. When such a large batch of medicinal pellets was distributed, even the various feudal lords who had come to the immortal world to broaden their horizons were shocked. How many so-called spiritual herbs and immortal herbs were needed to refine them? However, it was just a slight shock, and it didn't matter in the blink of an eye. In any case, everyone was used to seeing Yu Qianzhou's remarkable abilities, and it wasn't the first time they had seen something so inconceivable. The method to consume the medicinal pellets was not a problem for the feudal lords who were experienced. They quickly took the items they received and went to make arrangements. Half a day later, the crowd at the foot of the God of Fortune Peak sat down cross-legged. In an instant, the fragrance of various medicinal pellets filled the air, but the millions of people present were so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. In the following days, the sky above the God of Fortune Peak was covered with dark clouds. It was as if thousands of thunderbolts were connected to the God of Fortune Peak. There was an endless stream of experts who had forcibly raised their cultivation to the immortal realm flying up to the God of Fortune Peak to forge their immortal bodies. There was also an endless stream of people who were overjoyed and successful flying down to the God of Fortune Peak, willing to wait for arrangements. A month later, the entire cornucopia was empty. The millions of people had all disappeared, and everything that could be taken away from the World Commerce Chamber had been taken away. The wild beasts and birds in the mountains gradually became bolder and began to appear in this area. The empty houses became their safe nests to shelter from the wind and rain. The spiders also began to weave their webs on the doors and windows without worry. No one knew when the owner of this place would return. It was not only the cornucopia. In places that were difficult for mortals to reach, such as primeval forests, mountains and seas, or places that were shrouded in clouds and mist, there were places that were left empty in the eyes of mortals. There were no more immortals who could fly in the sky or burrow into the ground, and there were no more world-shocking magical powers. There were only richly ornamented buildings, jade palaces, and wonderful cave dwellings listening to the bleak wind. From then on, in the emptiness, they experienced fine winds and beautiful suns, drizzling rain, torrential rain, or heavy snowfall. Gradually, they would decay until the day the entire world would be peaceful and tranquil. Within the ruins of God, when the Nanming ancestor learned that his disciples had arrived, he personally came to pick them up and bring them back to the Great Flame Mountain. The commanders of the armies had no objections to this. After all, the Great War was imminent, and they had raised their cultivation. It would be bad if they did not have a suitable weapon. In the end, during a meeting of the commanders of the various armies, everyone agreed that it was not enough to just refine weapons. They should form another team that could refine pills to prevent the treatment of injuries during the war. Therefore, the people who were skilled in refining pills were transferred out from the various armies. When they found out that Guan Weiwu of the supporting Immortal Island had a past with Yu Qianzhou, they were all sensible people, so they unanimously recommended Guan Weiwu to be in charge of refining pills. In this regard, Yu Qianzhou did not express any objections. He mainly focused his energy on commanding the 10 armies in battle. When these guys gathered together to fight, even if they united, they would at most attack like a swarm of bees. They did not have the slightest military accomplishment to speak of. Among them, there were countless people who were crafty and deceitful. Even the commanders of the various armies did not have any military concept. They only knew that there were so many people under their command, and they were so excited that they rubbed their palms together. When they had nothing to do, they would ask Yu Qianzhou when he could pull them out for a fight. This matter gave Yu Qianzhou a headache, but it was not good to dampen their enthusiasm. However, if he allowed them to continue like this, they would sooner or later be taught a bloody lesson and suffer a great loss. After all, everyone's cultivation was not that high. No matter how many of them there were, they would not be able to fight against one or two experts. Therefore, Yu Qianzhou had no choice but to organize the commanders of the various armies to watch a good show. Zhang Peng led the hero army and gave everyone a super valiant training. It was called obedience, invincibility, and invincibility. The power of team coordination was displayed to the fullest, and the commanders of the various armies were shocked. On top of a tall hill in the eastern Holy Land, several hundred people stood together and looked down at the nearly 10,000 heroic soldiers who had gathered together after their training. Their ranks were as neat as tofu, and a powerful killing intent lingered in the air above them. Several hours had passed, but not a single person moved a single finger. The commanders of the various armies looked down silently, and their expressions were very solemn. They all thought of the situation where their subordinates had gathered together. That could only be called gathering, and not a formation. Not to mention the fact that the crowd was scattered and disorderly, all of them were standing unsteadily and looking left and right. When they gave orders, they had to rely on their profound cultivation and use the megaphone to shout wildly. Yet, they had been so proud of themselves for being able to command so many people. However, look at the commander of the other armies. With just a gesture, they would fight wherever he pointed and absolutely obey orders. After a long period of silence, many people looked at each other in dismay. They all understood why Yu Qianzhou had brought them here to watch. This group of prideful fellows understood the disparity between them. They had been led here by Yu Qianzhou to be slapped in the face by reality. All of them were instantly ashamed, and they all realized the disparity in their ability to command. Everyone. Yu Qianzhou, who was standing at the very front of the hill, finally spoke. He waved his hand and pointed at the orderly formation below. He sneered and said, "Don't be fooled by the fact that you have 1,000,000 subordinates. Do you believe that I only need these 10,000 people to defeat all of you? And this is under the condition that they are not fully equipped with the extraterrestrial metal armor. No. I'm wrong. Your subordinates can't be considered an army. They are just a motley crew." A gust of wind blew, and everyone's long robes became messy. All of them silently agreed with what Yu Qianzhou had said. After a long time, Yunnan Tian, who was at the side, said in a weak voice, "Torture Master, you said it yourself. Our subordinates can't be considered an army. If we give them some time to train, they will naturally become something." "Oh." Yu Qianzhou made a long "oh" sound. He turned around and looked at the crowd with a disapproving smile on his face. He said, "Then I'll wait and see. However, I see that you are dressed so elegantly. You don't look like someone who can train an army to conquer the world. You are good at seducing women. How about this? I have an idea. Xuxin of Womanland also has more women in her subordinates and some merged sections. Moreover, most of the people in your sect are women. Moreover, it's really inconvenient for the division leaders to command if men and women mix together. Why don't we reorganize a division that belongs to women? You and Xuxin can be partners." As soon as he said this, many of the division leaders couldn't help but burst into laughter. They all looked at Yunnan Tian with ridicule. Many of them even joined in. "I think Torture Master's idea is not bad." Bullsh *T. Yunnan Tian looked around and scolded. His face was gloomy. This was too embarrassing. However, it made the crowd laugh even harder. Xuxin flashed out of the crowd and looked Yunnan Tian up and down. She spat and said, "What's wrong with women? It's a good job for a man like you to mix with women. Don't be so shameless. We women don't care about you. Who do you think you are? Why don't you look at yourself in the mirror?" Yunnan Tian sneered and said, "Of course. In Xuxin's eyes, except for Nongzhu, who is a decent man, who else will she like? Xuxin immediately sneered and said, of course. Nongzhu relies on the nature of a man, unlike you who put on a body full of hair to pretend. Then she bowed to Yu Qianzhou and said, Torture Master. I agree with your decision to establish a division of women. However, Xuxin disdains to be a partner with this man. Please transfer Nongzhu here to be my partner. Chapter 1141. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but think of Qianghua Fairy, the head of the Moon Clan who was under her command. If he really made Nongzhu fall in love with her, there would be a good show to watch. He really wanted to do that, but now was not the time for them to talk about love. He coughed and said, in your dreams. Do you want Nongzhu to have a baby with you? Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. Yunnan Tian laughed more happily than anyone else, as if he had vented his anger. Xu Xian bit her lips and raised her eyebrows. If you really want to do that and Nongzhu agrees, Xu Xian will not object. Such courage made everyone burst into laughter again. All right. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand to stop them from laughing. It was enough to relax for a while. They couldn't keep fooling around at this critical moment. His face darkened, and he said, that's it. We will build an army composed of women. Yunnan Tian will be the commander, and Xu Xian will assist. Before he finished his words, the two of them lost their voices and said, torture envoy. Yunnan Tian didn't expect Yu Qianzhou to really do this. It was so unreasonable. And Xu Xian didn't want Yunnan Tian to be above her. Why should a man be the commander of a women's army? Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at them, causing them to swallow back their words. Then, he coldly glanced at the crowd, causing them to be unable to laugh. Then he continued slowly, this is not a joke. An army with men and women training together is a real joke. When we go back, the 10 armies will discuss with each other and adjust the number of soldiers reasonably. Anyway, we will remove all the women and form the 11th army. I know that many of them are husband and wife or our relatives, but I'm doing this for the good of everyone. It's better to let the men do the fighting and the women do the logistics in the rear. I think they'll be happy for the safety of their relatives. He had this idea before and wanted to find an opportunity that everyone could accept. Otherwise, it would be more difficult to command a temporary army with a family living in a team. Secondly, they would have a group of hostages in their hands, which would more or less make the motley crew think twice. Yunnan Tian and Xu Xian's faces became more and more gloomy. It turned out that they were in charge of a logistics team. The others had no objections to this. As long as it did not weaken their authority, it was fine. They all agreed to carry it out as soon as they returned. Everyone. There are some things that I have to say first. Yu Qianzhou looked at the crowd and said, now that everyone's cultivation base is about the same, it doesn't matter who is in charge. If the corps commander of any legion is not capable enough, I don't mind recruiting more capable people from below. As for those who have made great contributions, they will be rewarded with unimaginable benefits in the future. Who knows, they might even have the opportunity to establish their own sect in the immortal world. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere instantly became heavy. Putting aside the matter of whether he could establish a sect in the immortal dimension in the future, if the disciples he ordered around in the past were to order him around instead, then it would truly be a fatal matter. Only then did everyone realize that they had boarded Yu Qianzhou's pirate ship. It was too late for regrets. After a moment of silence, Hu Changshou suddenly walked out and cupped his hands, saying, Torture envoy. You also know that we have no experience in leading an army to war. I see that Zhang Peng is quite proficient in this field. Can we ask him for some advice? Everyone's eyes also looked at Zhang Peng, who was standing still in front of the formation below. Yu Qianzhou's gaze swept across everyone's faces. Seeing that everyone's faces were full of anticipation, he was instantly delighted. This was the effect he had spent a lot of effort to achieve. If he forced them to train, it would definitely cause these guys to resent him. If they did not actively cooperate, then it would be big trouble. He tilted his head and suddenly shouted, "Zhang Peng." Zhang Peng responded with a yes and flew up in a flash. Yu Qianzhou pointed at everyone and said, "Before the war, the training of the 11 legions will be handed over to you." Zhang Peng immediately accepted the order. After everyone returned to the Divine Ruin Realm, the core members of the various legions immediately surrounded Zhang Peng to ask for advice. Zhang Peng first explained to everyone the importance of the legion's hierarchy, then asked them to sort out this matter first. Everyone was smart and felt that it was reasonable. They immediately dispersed and hurriedly went to deal with this matter. By the time they came one after another to ask for advice, Zhang Peng had already divided the battle-hardened heroic army into 20 legions and let each legion lead 2 teams of people. One team would be used to train the people under them, and the other team would be sent to strictly enforce military discipline. How could a newly formed mob be so easy to train? As a result, on the same day, many of the troublemakers in the 10 legions were killed on the spot by the law enforcement team. In total, there were more than 10,000 people, and it almost caused an uproar. After all, everyone was now at the immortal realm, so there was no need to be afraid of them. However, in order to twist the evil aura of this group of repulsive people and get them on the right track as soon as possible, Yu Qianzhou made up his mind and sent Deming Luan, Wei Chunxiu, and Yun Peng, these 3 immortal emperor-level experts, to patrol around. Yu Qianzhou's original words to the 3 of them were, "Don't be lenient, kill those who need to be killed." It was better for some of them to die now than all of them in the future. As a result, the 3 of them killed another 10,000 people the next day. Seeing that there were immortal emperor-level experts holding down the fort, killing them as easily as cutting vegetables, the mob immediately understood how insignificant they were. They were so scared that they kept quiet out of fear and became well-behaved. Their training was finally on the right track. In fact, most of these troublemakers were the subordinates of the various countries' lords, or people who were used to having power in their sections. Ordinary people didn't dare to jump around. As the training progressed, those people who usually didn't have the chance to raise their heads in their sects suddenly realized that under this strict hierarchy, no matter what your background was, as long as your results were better than others and you were more capable than others, the instructors would immediately give you a chance to be promoted. As for those who were mediocre, no matter how powerful your background was, they would immediately be beaten down. The rise of a group of powerless and insignificant people immediately set off a prairie fire in the 10 great legions. Those who had never had the chance to stand out immediately desperately seized this opportunity to stand out. As a result, the descendants of those with power and influence in the past were immediately unhappy. Those who were usually trampled under their feet were now bossing them around. How could they accept this? Hence, they all relied on their connections to find the lords of the legion's core, their fathers, or their masters to complain. The most typical example was Hu Changshou's son, Hu Yuntian. Hu Changshou couldn't help but be selfish in the initial stages of the establishment of the legion. 100,000 people were to be divided into 10 divisions, so he made his son a division commander. Needless to say, Hu Yuntian was quite happy to see so many subordinates under him. The military rules stated that as a division commander, his words were like a mountain to the tens of thousands of people under him. They had to obey his orders, and those who disobeyed would be directly punished by military law. This was much more power than when he borrowed his father's influence in the Cloud Palace. These people were all under his command. Hence, both openly and secretly, he promoted the wisdom of the torturer, Yu Qianzhou, and strongly supported the military management of the various forces. He also thought that since his father was the legion commander, it was only a matter of time before he was promoted from division commander to one of the 3 corps commanders. At that time, his authority would increase by several times. In order to facilitate his management in the future, he strongly opposed the original forces in the legion forming factions and disobeying the orders of their superiors. However, when the higher-ups began to send people down, he, the son of the Legion commander, was demoted by the chief instructor during the training and assessment. He was demoted from division commander to company commander. In the end, the chief instructor said that with his current ability, he could only be a company commander at most. Imagine going from commanding tens of thousands of people to commanding hundreds of people. The difference was 100 times. Hu Yuntian was instantly furious, but he didn't dare to vent his anger on those heartless people. Hence, he went to find Hu Changshou. In the end, he was scolded by Hu Changshou. Hu Changshou said that his own position was in danger, so how could he have the time to care about him? After chasing his son away, Hu Changshou went to pester Zhang Peng to teach him military command experience. Similar things happened one after another in the early stages, but they received strong support from the majority of the people. After all, everyone had a chance to stand out. In just a few days, under the impact of the military system, the prestige system that the various sects and forces had maintained for hundreds or even thousands of years collapsed overnight. The various forces wanted to save the situation, but they couldn't. When they thought about it, they realized that Yu Qianzhou was too sinister. Helping him reorganize millions of people was definitely the stupidest thing to do. Otherwise, Yu Qianzhou would still need to rely on everyone. But now, if they didn't listen, Yu Qianzhou could kick them out at any time. Moreover, they wouldn't have anything left. This was definitely a huge scam. However, in the face of the tide, those who went with the flow would prosper, while those who went against the flow would die. In addition, there was no turning back. This group of people wanted to cry but had no tears. They could only compete with everyone else. The 11th division was made up of women, and it was the division with the largest number of people among the 11 divisions. Originally, there were very few women compared to men, but because all the women were gathered together, there were a total of 150,000 women, which was more than half the number of men in the other divisions. Seeing that many grassroots disciples in the other legions had become officials, these women were greatly moved. An undercurrent was brewing like a raging storm. At first, Yu Nantian and Shu Xian didn't take it seriously. They could do whatever they wanted. After all, they were in the logistics department. So, this group of women was like herding sheep, wandering around aimlessly. When Yu Qianzhou started to cause trouble for these two people, he revealed that if they really didn't have the ability to lead this division, then they should be soldiers and let someone else lead them. Seeing that they were being serious, the two people panicked, especially Yu Nantian. How could he accept the fact that women were leading them? They immediately asked Zhang Peng for help. Seeing that other places were on the right track, Zhang Peng transferred a group of people from the law enforcement team to help them reorganize. Zhang Peng was indeed very busy. Not only did he have to take care of the entire base, he also had to give lessons to the division leaders who pestered him every day. After the great Ming Luan trio, who were patrolling around, understood the cause and effect of the entire matter, they were sincerely convinced of Yu Qianzhou's abilities for the first time. Such a large conspiracy had been carried out in such a secretive manner. Unexpectedly, no one had noticed anything fishy about it. His methods were truly capable of changing the weather with one turn of his hand. In such a short period of time, more than 1 million people were trained into obedience. They abandoned their original deep-rooted notions of power and quickly and willingly accepted his orders. Moreover, everyone was fighting to join him for fear of falling behind. How many people could have such ability? Chapter 1142. Since there were no more violations, De Ming Luan and the other two didn't need to patrol around anymore. On this day, when the three of them returned to the base, they passed by Furong and the other women and heard them grumbling, blaming Yu Qianzhou for not letting them participate in such a lively event. Especially Zi, she pouted and said to the women, "You are all beauties in his harem. It's fine if he keeps you in his harem, but why doesn't he let me do this and that? It's so boring." Wei Chuanxiu, who was passing by, couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Little girl, that brat must have his reasons for doing this. Just listen to him. Otherwise, hee. I've finally learned something. That brat's methods are really powerful." The women looked at him in confusion. Ze was also familiar with him, so she immediately pestered him and asked with wide eyes, "What did the big liar do this time?" Hee. "You're right, he is indeed a big liar." Wei Chuanqiu immediately analyzed the things that Yu Qianqiu had done recently to the women. First, they used the invasion of the demon realm to scare the lords of the various countries. Then, they encouraged the lords to use their respective rallying powers to gather all the cultivators in one place. They raised everyone's cultivation to the immortal realm before bringing them back. Then, he used his power to lure the feudal lords and the original forces to help him straighten out the millions of people. Then, he tricked the feudal lords to watch a show, and made them take the initiative to ask for more training. Only then did Yu Qianqiu set up a set of design system for the millions of people. In the end, it didn't take long for the millions of people to completely change their views on sections. Everyone didn't take their original sects and feudal lords seriously, and only wanted to stand out and climb up under his system. Thus, in a short period of time, Yu Qianqiu completely won over the millions of people under his command. So many forces collapsed in the blink of an eye, and merged into Yu Qianqiu's force. Do you guys think that brat is a big liar? Do you guys think that brat is powerful? Wei Chuanqiu walked towards the depths of the base while shaking his head and sighing, "Powerful. How amazing. I've lived for so long, but this is the first time I've seen someone use such a strange method to control so many people. It's thousands of times more powerful than conquering people by force." If Jin Tai and Bai Qi had used this system in the immortal realm and the netherworld, they wouldn't have fallen to such a state, tsk. What they didn't know was that this was just their own analysis. To Yu Qianqiu, this was just going with the flow. Of course, there was no lack of scheming. However, from Yu Qianqiu's point of view, this system was just a system that had been perfected in his previous life. He had only roughly imitated it from his previous life. He had not designed it at all, and it was not as powerful and exaggerated as Wei Chuanqiu had described. Of course, it seemed to have a good effect in the short term, but as time passed, it would not be able to withstand the corrosion of human greed. Most importantly, everyone's cultivation level was about the same now, so he had only borrowed it for a while. He definitely did not think that it was as exaggerated as Wei Chuanqiu had described. However, for Furong and the others, after hearing Wei Chuanqiu's description, they felt as if they had seen a huge net that had been meticulously laid out step by step. It was like a monster that could devour the heavens and swallow 1,000,000 people in one gulp. Just thinking about it was too terrifying. They felt that Yu Qianqiu's schemes were too frightening. Immortal Crocodile and Ji Wu looked at each other, stunned by Wei Chuanqiu's analysis. Ze watched Wei Chuanqiu leave with her mouth wide open. After a long time, she gulped and said, "Big liar, he deceived so many people at once. It's too scary." Beside her, the Allure Beauty shook her head slightly and said, "In such a chaotic world, a man should be like this. Otherwise, how can he achieve anything? This is not scary. It can only be said that his ability is something that others can't even beg for." Furong and the others also shook their heads to get rid of the terrible haze that Wei Chuanqiu had described in their minds, and then nodded in agreement with the Allure Beauty's words. It just so happened that Yu Qianqiu had straightened out the matters in the Divine Ruin Realm, and the matter of arranging weapons for everyone was put on the agenda. He couldn't let so many people still use weapons from the human world to fight against the people of the demon realm. Before leaving, he called Hong Qi over, and the two of them walked over while talking. The mother and daughter were crying and saying that you killed Ma Jiugu. What's going on? Yu Qianqiu asked with a frown. Hong Qi did listen to him and kidnapped by Hua Fairy and Yan Zixia, but the mother and daughter acted like he was an irreconcilable enemy when they saw him. They questioned him, saying that Ma Jiugu had no grievances with him, so why didn't he let her go? Yan Zixia was even more desperate to fight with him, but her cultivation was sealed, so she couldn't hurt anyone. Then, she took the initiative to ask Ferdinand, who was guarding them, to forcibly take them away. Looking at Ferdinand's appearance, he was also quite emotional, and his expression was somewhat inexplicable, as if he was afraid that he would hurt the mother and daughter, so he volunteered to guard them. Yu Qianzhou had a lot of things to do, so he didn't pay attention to them at first, but before he left, he couldn't help but call Hong Qi over to ask what was going on. Hong Qi smiled bitterly and said, "Master, I didn't want to. Killing people is not something to be happy about. But that old woman stayed with the mother and daughter day and night. When I took action, that old woman risked her life to protect them. I remembered that Master said that anyone who dares to stop me will be killed, so I directly killed her. Oh. Right, I also killed a beautiful woman, who turned out to be a toad demon. Don't worry, Master. Nobody knows that the mother and daughter were kidnapped by us. Those who know have been killed by me, and I have also disposed of their corpses cleanly." The last sentence sounded like he was bragging. Yu Qianzhou was stunned and said, "Lan Bingxue was also killed by you?" He still wanted to find this B*TCH to settle the score with Furong one day, but he didn't expect this disciple to make the first move. It seemed that this kid had been in the gang for a long time, and he was not careless when it came to killing flowers. "Did you kill the wrong person?" Hong Qi asked a little weakly. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand helplessly and said, "Forget it. So be it. You go and do your thing." He now finally understood why Ferdinand looked a little weird. He probably knew that Lan Bingxue was killed from the mother and daughter. After all, the two used to be husband and wife. No matter how big the conflict between them was, it would be a lie to say that he didn't feel anything after knowing that the person was dead. Looking at the back of Hong Qi leaving, he shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. Just when he walked a few steps with his hands behind his back, he saw a group of women in the hall of the base looking at him strangely, as if they didn't know him. He couldn't help but be stunned and touched his face. He didn't wear a mask. He was a little stunned and said, "What's wrong with you guys?" The women shook their heads together to show that it was nothing. Zi looked at Hong Qi, who had disappeared, and asked weakly, "Yu Qianzhou, what are you and Hong Qi whispering about? Are you thinking of doing something bad again?" "Psycho." Yu Qianzhou snorted. Just when he was about to turn into the passage on the side, he suddenly stopped and stared at Zi for a while with deep meaning. He wondered if he should arrange for Jasper Flower Fairy to meet this woman. It would be good to have a mother to teach her how to be a woman so that she wouldn't always talk nonsense when she saw him. But when he thought of Nongzhu's attitude, it seemed a little immoral for him to fan the fire in her backyard when she went to do something for him. After hesitating for a while, he temporarily gave up the idea. Zi was stared at by his strange eyes and then thought of Wei Chuanqiu's words. She suddenly felt creeped out. The other women also looked at each other. At this moment, Zhang Peng rushed in from outside. After bowing to his master and showing respect to the women, he reported to Yu Qianzhou, "Master, I accidentally found Shi Wenguang's son, Shi Xiaotian, in the army." He meant to ask if Yu Qianzhou had any instructions. He knew that Yu Qianzhou and Shi Xiaotian used to have a good friendship. He vaguely remembered that Shi Xiaotian had always called his master boss at that time, so he said this. "Shi Xiaotian?" Yu Qianzhou was startled. Only now did he remember that he hadn't seen this kid for many years and had almost forgotten about him. He couldn't help but click his tongue and said, "Hong Qi and the others really plundered all the cultivators in the mortal world clean. Even Shi Xiaotian, who was hiding in the imperial palace, was pulled over by them. By the way, since Shi Xiaotian is here, he should have seen me when he was in the cornucopia and should know that I am here. Why didn't he come to me? Could it be that there are obstructions?" "That's not it. Zhang Peng smiled and said, I asked him after I saw him. He seems to be a little worried that you won't recognize him now that your status is different. He's afraid that you won't recognize him anymore. He's afraid that something awkward will happen if he suddenly asks to see you, so he wants to see you but doesn't dare to. I've already brought him to you. He's just outside. Do you want to see him? This kid. Yu Qianzhou also chuckled twice, raised his hand, and said, this boy was once a brother who went through thick and thin with me. Since he came, no matter how busy he is, I have to see him. Invite him to the conference room. I want to catch up with him. Zhang Peng accepted the order and left. Yu Qianzhou first went to the base's conference room while the women were discussing who this Shi Xiaotian was. Furong, who had seen Shi Xiaotian in the northwest barracks, roughly explained his identity. Not long after, a nervous Shi Xiaotian was led in. He didn't dare to look around, but when he saw a group of beautiful women staring at him, he quickly lowered his head. He didn't notice that Hibiscus was greeting him with an expectant look on her face, so he followed Zhang Peng into the passageway. After Zhang Peng led him to the door of the conference room, he stretched his hand and said, Master is waiting for you inside. I won't disturb you anymore. After saying that, he left. Shi Xiaotian looked left and right, feeling a little uneasy at the door. He nervously rubbed his hands together and finally gritted his teeth and slowly walked in. Chapter 1143. Walking lightly into the spacious conference room, Shi Xiaotian saw Yu Qianzhou's familiar and warm smile at first glance. Shi Xiaotian's tense heart had just relaxed when he saw Yu Qianzhou's face gradually surging with a solemn expression. His heart immediately tightened again. He respectfully saluted and said, Punishment envoy. Don't be so distant. There's no need to be like this between us. Yu Qianzhou sighed and shook his head. Actually, Shi Xiaotian had misunderstood him. He just suddenly realized that Shi Xiaotian had changed from that inexperienced youth to a tough middle-aged man. He felt like he was dreaming. He thought back to how pathetic they were when they escaped from Anquangcang. In the blink of an eye, decades had passed. However, the Yu Qianzhou in Shi Xiaotian's eyes was still the same as before. Other than the baptism of hardships on his face, his entire aura had changed. He was no longer hiding in his own house and didn't dare to go out. His appearance didn't seem to have changed much. Seeing that he was still a little reserved, Yu Qianzhou took the initiative to walk over and naturally put his arm on Shi Xiaotian's shoulder. He chuckled and said, Xiaotian, I didn't expect a pretty boy like you to become so manly. It seems like you've seen many beauties in your family's palace. Although it was a teasing remark, such a familiar action immediately made Shi Xiaotian feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He realized that his boss was still the same boss and hadn't changed at all. Thus, the big man instantly became teary-eyed. He turned around and grabbed Yu Qianzhou's arm and choked, Boss. What are you crying for? You're disgusting. Yu Qianzhou pushed him away. He didn't expect Shi Xiaotian to still be that unlucky person who cried at the slightest provocation. He pulled a chair behind him and sat down. He looked at Shi Xiaotian like he was looking at a playboy and said, What's going on? Since you saw me, why didn't you come to find me? Take a seat and tell me slowly. He hooked a chair with his leg. Shi Xiaotian felt a little embarrassed under his gaze. He rubbed his eyes, sat opposite him, and told him the reason. It turned out that his current identity was already the state preceptor Yongzhen of the Wuxia Empire. After listening to Yu Qianzhou's words, he had never had much contact with the people of the cultivation world. However, when Yu Qianzhou ordered all the cultivators to gather at the cornucopia, he was a dignified state preceptor of the Wuxia Empire and could be considered a person with a little fame in the cultivation world. Naturally, Honggang and Qinggang couldn't miss him when they summoned people. When he received the notice that it was Yu Qianzhou who gathered all the cultivators in the world, he was extremely excited and eagerly ran to the gathering. When he arrived at the cornucopia, he saw millions of cultivators, among which there were even many experts. However, these people all worshipped Yu Qianqiu. He immediately understood that Yu Qianqiu was now the ruler of the world. Although he was some state preceptor, he didn't even have the qualifications to speak to Yu Qianqiu. He saw Yu Qianqiu's several appearances at the cornucopia, and he also hoped that Yu Qianqiu could see him. However, Yu Qianqiu's eyes only swept past him and didn't linger on him at all. This further dispelled the idea of rashly looking for Yu Qianqiu. To be exact, he didn't dare to do so. After that, he saw Yu Qianqiu communicating with the heavenly thunder on the cornucopia to help everyone forge the immortal body. This made him tremble with fear and didn't dare to be presumptuous. It was also here that he accidentally met Zhangpeng, an acquaintance. Otherwise, it would be difficult for the two to recognize each other even though they were so close. The conference room fell silent. Yu Qianqiu didn't say a word. He had gained a lot and lost a lot along the way. As long as he continued to walk the path, such things would be unavoidable. Gains and losses would always accompany him. Shi Xiaotian looked at him silently. Thinking back to when the two of them were still working hard in Anquangceng, he never thought that Yu Qianqiu's future achievements would reach such heights. He didn't know that there was always someone better than him. After a long silence, Yu Qianqiu slowly said, "Xiaotian, you should go back to the human world." Shi Xiaotian was startled and then said anxiously, "Boss. Let me stay by your side and travel the 3 realms with you." After coming to the Divine Ruin realm and coming into contact with so many people and things, he realized that the outside world was actually so vast and so exciting. It was much more interesting than being the imperial preceptor in the human world. Moreover, he had such a powerful boss to protect him. He hadn't even seen the immortal and netherworld yet. How could he go back? Yu Qianqiu gently waved his hand and said with a faint smile, "The outside world isn't as fun as you think. There's a price to pay for fun. You might not think so. Now that you have forged the immortal body, it's better for you to stay in the human world and enjoy your wealth. You and I are brothers, this is all I can help you with. Let's go. Don't say any more, I'll send you back." With a wave of his hand, Shi Xiaotian suddenly felt the scene change. When it stabilized, he found that he had returned to the back garden of the Pillar of State General's residence. However, there was no one living here now. His entire family had moved into the palace, and only a few servants were here to take care of it. Shi Xiaotian looked around and knew that it was useless to say anything else. He forced a smile and said, "I didn't expect boss to still remember this place." Boss. Since you're already here, go to the palace and rest for a while. My father often mentions you and has been longing to see you again. I almost forgot, your family is already the royal family. It's good to know the way. Lead the way. Yu Qianqiu said with a faint smile. Shi Xiaotian let out a happy sigh and flew into the sky. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind. The two of them quickly flew over the bustling capital city below and directly entered the Grand Palace. Under a gold-plated Yongzhen plaque, Shi Xiaotian invited Yu Qianqiu to sit in the imperial advisor's mansion. The eunuchs and attendants were ordered by Shi Xiaotian to work around the clock to serve Yu Qianqiu. Those eunuchs and attendants secretly looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise, wondering who this young man was to make imperial advisor Yongzhen, who was second only to the emperor, treat him with such respect. Therefore, they didn't dare to neglect him. Yu Qianqiu didn't have the time to slowly enjoy this ostentatious scene. He told Shi Xiaotian to stop wasting time and quickly invite his family to meet him. Shi Xiaotian asked him to wait for a moment and quickly ran away. The group of eunuchs was even more shocked. This person actually dared to order the godlike imperial preceptor Yongzhen around like this. For a moment, they were so nervous that they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They waited for a full 2 hours. Yu Qianzhou looked around the Grand Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen and was still wondering why he was taking so long. Outside the door, a large group of men, women, old and young had already arrived. There were more than 100 people rushing in. Some of them were even infants in the arms of the women waiting to be fed. However, all of them were dressed luxuriously. The people in the front were all wearing yellow dragon robes. One look and one could tell that they were the descendants of the royal family. Many of them seemed to be puzzled. They didn't know why they were called here in such a hurry. Yu Qianzhou immediately saw Shi Wenguang, who looked vigorous despite his old age. Behind him were his sons and daughters-in-law. He didn't know the men, women, or children behind them, but it was obvious that they were all from the same family. Yu Qianzhou thought to himself, "My goodness, the royal family is indeed different. It's amazing how they spread their branches and leaves." Just as a smile appeared on his face, Shi Wenguang, who was wearing the dragon robe, was already in front of him. He was the first to kneel down and excitedly called out, "Mr." Regardless of whether they knew what was going on or not, when they saw the emperor kneeling down, they immediately followed suit in fear and called out, "Mr." Shi Xiaotian hurriedly stepped aside in embarrassment. The group of eunuchs and attendants were shocked by this scene, and immediately knelt down as well in horror. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, sat there calmly. He crossed his legs and raised his hand, saying, "Rise, all of you. Rise." He also felt that he deserved this bow. He had given the greatest wealth in the mortal world to their family and saved their lives. It was not too much to accept their bow. Shi Wenguang immediately led a large group of his family members and stood up. Yu Qianzhou also stood up with a smile and walked in front of him, saying, "General Shi, you are still strong despite your age. Congratulations." He was too lazy to change the way he addressed him. "It's all thanks to Mr.'s favor. Mr. is still as elegant as ever, like a celestial being. Shi Wenguang can only envy you." Shi Wenguang was filled with endless gratitude. He was almost 90 years old, but he was still more spirited than his own descendants. He understood that this was the result of Yu Qianzhou's immortal elixir back then. He was even thinking of finding a suitable opportunity to ask for a few more. Yu Qianzhou smiled and turned his gaze to behind Shi Wenguang. There were 4 familiar faces who were used to a good life and had already changed their figures. There were 2 old men who were close to the end of their lives, and 2 graceful women. He pointed at them one by one and said with a smile, "Shi Yu Tian, Shi Yin Tian, Bao Wanshi, Situ Hui." "Huh. Did I remember correctly? Greetings, Mr." The 4 people who were called out were pleasantly surprised and hurriedly came forward to salute. When the 2 women saw that the man who had some entanglements with them in the past was still as young as before, their eyes couldn't help but shine with admiration. Among them, Shi Yu Tian was even more excited. He had always been interested in becoming an immortal. Back then, he thought that Yu Qianzhou was a celestial being and had always wanted to follow him to cultivate. Now that he saw Yu Qianzhou's youthful appearance, he couldn't help but feel his heart itch. Where's Madame Li?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at the crowd and didn't see the mistress of the house, Li Hongnyang. As soon as he said this, the atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Shi Yintian explained in a low voice, "Mr. Mother passed away 5 years ago." "I see." Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and consoled, "Birth, old age, sickness, and death are the laws of nature. Everyone, don't be too sad." His words were pleasant to the ears. Why didn't he look at himself standing there with his youthful appearance? Who wouldn't be envious of him? Moreover, Shi Wenguang had lived a long life because of him. Once a person reached the peak of riches and honor, he would naturally desire longevity. Shi Yu Tian suddenly thought of something and hurriedly called out a group of juniors from the crowd to greet Yu Qianzhou. He even pulled their faces in front of Yu Qianzhou, as if he wanted Yu Qianzhou to take a closer look at them. In the end, the second son's daughter-in-law was also enlightened. She also pulled out her juniors for a walk. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the anxious Shi Tian. He could see that this guy still hadn't changed. He didn't have the aptitude to cultivate, and he placed all his hopes on the juniors. Even the second son's daughter-in-law was infected. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.